Yo, let's go. What's up, y'all? Good afternoon, friends. Today we're covering Dante's Inferno, the circa 14th century epic poem by Dante, the first part of the trilogy or the three-part poem, the Divine Comedy. Of course, Dante calls it the comedy. He refers to it himself as the comedy in the poem. It was later added by scholars. The divine part was added by scholars. Yes, this is based analyzation. What's up, everybody? What's up, Rachel? Based homeschool mom. Shouts out to all my mods and friends out there. Shouts out to Nateski. Somebody get Blocksky in here because I have him to thank for listening to that song a million times over. And yeah, we've got some BLA wave on the way. It's being made right now. Hopefully by one of our homies out there. So yeah, that will be here soon. So let's dive in. Today we're covering Dante's Inferno, and we'll be looking at the Robert Pinsky translation from the early 90s. I guess, sort of a personal connection to this translation, only because I talked about this before on the stream, how I got to meet Robert Pinsky. He was the poet laureate of the United States for a number of years. And I saw him do a reading, and of course he recited his poem. Oh, my table's falling apart. There we go. He recited his poem called ABC when I saw him, and it's so easy to memorize. I memorized it the very first time I heard it. ABC, right? Anybody can die, evidently. Few go happily, radiating joy, knowledge, love. Many need oblivion, painkillers, quickest respite, sweet time, unafflicted, various worlds. X equals your zenith. So Robert Pinsky translated the Inferno by Dante. So the reason that we're covering this is because, like we usually do with a lot of the literature that we cover, this is one of those poems or one of those major works in the canon that is referenced all the time. Right. We see it all the time in media, in film, in literature. It's completely incorporated into, even though it's an Italian poem, it's incorporated in the language of it, is incorporated into our language. And most of the time, people will use references to the Inferno without even realizing it. So I thought that it would be prudent. It would not be prudent. I thought it would be prudent to go back and reread this poem. I read it a number of times, a bunch of times. I've read this over the years quite a few times. So I thought that it would be prudent to go back and reread it one more time, and then to do an analysis so that we can look at the actual text. Because as we've seen with a lot of the works that we've covered, and there's nothing wrong with the fact that, people reference, that's to be expected of great, art and works of literature, that people will reference it without having an idea of what the original source material, the text says. So yes, so I thought it would be good just to go back and look at the text. And I think that you may find that there is a lot about this poem and about Dante's worldview and about Dante's depiction of hell that is misunderstood, or that you may just not have known. Of course, nobody expects one to have read the Inferno. If you have read it, that's great. I'm not here to advocate, say go out and buy this book or anything. Although it is a great book, I would if you're going to read the Inferno. Harold Bloom says to read Shelley's translation of the Inferno, but I would read Robert Pinsky's. And we'll get into why that is in a second. We're going to talk about the text itself and the poetic style. Form plus content equals meaning, because it's important. It's integral to understanding the poem itself. We'll talk a little bit about Dante and Dante's own life. And but as usual, it's not really important to discuss the life of the poet, because what we remember is on the page, and that's what's integral to the poem. Of course, the protagonist, or the main character, or the speaker in the poem, is Dante himself. Of course, it's a literary version of Dante, and he has a guide in this, and the guide is Virgil, is the ancient Roman um, Augustan, the Emperor Augustus poet Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid, and the Aeneid plays a major role in the Inferno because, of course, if you've read the Aeneid, in the Aeneid, Aeneas goes down to the underworld seeking Dido, and of course that sets the stage for Dante using him as his guide in the poem. He's sort of a precursor, and he's like a big brother slash father figure, certainly a protector within the life of this poem. It is an epic poem by every standard. One, it is. It's written in cantos. Okay, so a canto is like cantare, right? It's like the ancient. It's to sing, right? Because the ancient poems, the epic poems, were sung. You think of the Homeric tradition. Of course, they're sung, but they are written on the page. The way that the poem looks on the page is integral to understanding the meaning of the poem, because Dante invented his own poetic form for this poem, which is called terza rima, which means that the poem is written in it has 34 cantos, each with, I think, what is it, 100 and how many lines are in each canto? Let's see, 120, about 127 to 129 lines in each canto. And of course, it's written in 3-line stanzas. Okay, so before I get into that, before I get into the poetic form and the translation and all this stuff and what the meaning of the poem, and also we're going to look at the architecture of hell in Dante's version. We're going to look at what the Inferno is like, what hell is like in Dante's world, or in his eyes and in his ears and in his nose. Sensory imagery plays a huge role in this poem. And it's important that he depicts hell sort of in a way that everyone can understand, because that plays into one of the reasons that he wrote the poem in the way that he did. The poem is written in Italian, and that sounds obvious because it's an Italian poem, but it's actually not obvious, because you would think that the poem in the 14th century would be in Latin, right, in the high style of the epic poem, like the Aeneid. However, Dante chose to write it in a Tuscan vernacular, and I think probably most people are unaware that one of the reasons that Dante is such a monumental, massive figure in literature, in the canon of literature, is because he gave Italy its tongue, its current tongue. Shakespeare is obviously responsible for modern English in a number of ways. I mean, he invented at least 1,800 neologisms, new words, and gave us our modern style, our modern English. We've talked about that before. Shakespeare and the King James Bible give us modern English. Go back to my Shakespeare streams and my Milton streams, my Anglo-Saxon streams, if you haven't seen those. But Dante gave Italy its current Italian language in pretty much every form. And he wrote the poem in the way that he did because he wanted to write in a common tongue, a way that would be understood by everyone. And it makes sense because if he's speaking in a low manner, right, the common vernacular, it makes sense because the form and the content work together, because he's going low. He's literally going low. He's underground. He's going into the abyss. He's going into hell. So it makes sense that his form and his content will work together to produce his overall meaning, which we will discuss. So before I get to that, thank you everybody out there who's here, and please make sure that you smash that like. We need those likes, those likes on the video to get the algorithm to pay attention to us in a good way, so we can keep promoting my videos, my streams, and the channel. please, if you would, if you feel like it, I would appreciate it if you would share the stream, tell your friends about it, or if you have any based friends, tell your friends about it, put it on your social medias, and most of all, please look at the PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo links there, and consider supporting me and supporting the channel. I need to buy some books. I need to. We all got to pay them bills, y'all. We got to pay them bills. So please consider supporting me and leaving a comment. And also, speaking of comments, make sure that you please leave a comment after the video's over. I get such great comments, and I really appreciate those. And I've been getting a lot of suggestions for works to cover. Of course, there's almost like an infinite number of literary works from which to choose. But I think we've done a good selection so far, you guys. What do you think? I mean, I think it's especially valuable that, we don't always have to cover the ancient works. I mean, recently we've done some more modern works. We did Lunar Park by Bret Easton Ellis. We've done Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. We did Joyce Carol Oates. We've done a few, and we'll go back into novels, of course. I want to get to Don DeLeo. I think I don't know what I'm going to cover next, but I'm sure whatever it is will probably, because we stay dialed in here, it will probably pop up somewhere soon, right? Synchro, you guys, right? So, cheers to everybody out there. Let's get this started. You know how we do it here. You know how we start it. All right. I want to say cheers to all my friends out there. Maybe we can get a good old bull sponsorship sometime soon. Wouldn't that be funny? Get a literary Red Bull sponsorship. No, but cheers to everybody out there. So, first of all, Dante. Let's see. Dante lived from, 1265 to September 14th, 1321. I say that because that's a good date. That's an important day. I'm not going to say why. But 1265 to 1321. He was a political figure. He had a number of smaller political roles. You guys, I know, Kristen. I know, ought to be drinking water, good old water. Listen, when I can't find, here in Appalachian, when I can't find a lighter to light my old Marlboro cigarette, shouts out to Appalachian, where the Marlboro comes from. You know what I do? I just go right on up to the faucet, turn the faucet on, light my cigarette that way, right? Love that good old flammable water. So, I do as the Romans do, right? Can't be drinking that water right now. You got to be drinking something else. And instead of drinking wine, I like to drink the wine of the 21st century. Good old bull. So Dante was a political figure. Of course, many people know, you may not know this, but, it's not really that important. But he lived in exile from his home of Florence. Any of you guys been to Florence? Have you been to Italy out there? I first went to Florence when I was 14. It's an amazing city. It's one of the great, obviously one of the great artistic and tourist cities of the world. You can go and see the Duomo and the Statue of David. And I was surprised, of course, when I was 14 and I went there, how big the Statue of David. You picture a Statue of David as like the size of a typical statue, if there is such a thing. I guess I was comparing it to, there's a statue of Caligula near me in a museum. It's one of the only statues of Caligula extant, and it happens to be near me. And I compared it to that in a museum here, and I compared it to that, but it's much larger. The Statue of David is the size of a giant, maybe one of the giants of the Ninth Circle, as we'll see. But yes, Florence is amazing, and Dante lived in exile from Florence. He lived in Ravenna, and I think he lived in Verona for a little while, but he died away from his city. Some scholars will maintain that the Inferno is sort of an allegory for Dante's exile and his passage to the underworld of his life or his psyche. I'm sure that was an inspiration for him. He wrote it when he was in exile, but I don't see that as being a major driving force in the poem. I mean, the poem, he goes to hell, and he describes it as he see it. My thesis for this poem is essentially that, I considered whether the poem would be Gnostic, as we've seen many of these works turn out to be Gnostic in terms, inherently Gnostic, and it is in many ways, with the idea of really the syzygy, okay, this, which is like essentially that Dante and his spirit guide are sort of tethered in this eon, um, and are traversing through the dark in order to get to the light. But that really plays more actually into the idea of what I said in the description of the video, which is something called contrapasso, which is that one thing that I think people will be surprised by is that in hell, um, my audience won't be surprised by this, but you may if you're watching this later, is that all of the damned in Dante's hell are suffering the sin, suffering a punishment that is a reflection of the sin for which they're damned. Um, and essentially, uh, one thing that I think a lot of people, of course, my audience will consider this, but a lot of people that don't consider is that, um, within the poem, there are a number of times where Dante is surprised, because of the pity that he feels for the damned. And Virgil will rebuke him a number of times and say, there's no need to feel pity. And the reason for that is because the people in hell are in they are in the midst of damnation, suffering because they are out of the light of God by their choice. They've chosen to be there. And even when they are suffering the torments of hell, everything that they say reflects that. They never will say that they wish for grace. They never, pray. They always are simply wrapped up in the sin um, with that they've committed, and they almost seem to relish it, if that makes sense. Um, we're also going to see that the poem. One thing that's surprising about the poem is the fact that it is almost purely, in many ways, it's almost purely nautical. The nautical themes are sort of everywhere in the poem. The language of the sea, of water pops up so many times in this poem, which I never really caught before, and that's surprising because when one thinks of Dante's Inferno, you think of the damned sort of traversing this this hellscape like that's terrain, but actually in many parts it's liquid, and that makes sense when you think about the fact that the Purgatorio is mostly land based, because Dante sort of represents it as Earth. It's the sort of Middle Earth, right? But Middle Earth. Shouts out, by the way, to the stream last night with Jay and Dean. Everybody go check out Jay's analysis, jaysanalysis.com, and watch his stream and conversation with Dean on C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. That was really, really good. It was pretty enlightening. I mean, I got a lot from that stream, as we always do. But with the Inferno, I think it makes sense that it's nautical in a way, the language at least, because the abyss, the zonal abyss, is the ocean, right? Because it's down beneath, it's under. And of course, an abyss is a bottomless pit. But the reason that it's zonal is because, number one, hell is laid out in 9 concentric circles. So they begin in the dark of the wood, as T.S. Eliot pointed out, and they circle and circle and go down. And there's all these valleys and lakes and rivers of blood, and they traverse Malebolge and all these regions of hell that are terrifying. Malebolge reminds me always of Chernobog. Chernobog, of course, is the demon that is in Fantasia. You remember that, you guys? At the top of the mountain. But Malebolge is, and the Malebranche are these sort of these system of demons that appear. And another surprising thing is that the demons actually don't appear until fairly late in the poem. You would think that once they enter the first circle of hell, if you're unread in the poem, and that's fine, that they'd immediately be tormented by demons, but they're not. It's not until much later in the poem, like way, way down in the circles. I think in the seventh circles when they start to see actual demons tormenting people. And of course, back to the zonal abyss, there is a bottom. Dante points out that the 9 circles of hell have a bottom, and that makes sense that there is, and he calls it the bottom of the universe. And again, the major thing to point out about this poem, which I've always found fascinating, and Milton obviously took parts of this. Milton's Paradise Lost is far different from Dante's Inferno, but you can tell in sections where Shakespeare and Milton stole from Dante, and that's fine. We discussed that great poets will steal, bad artists, mediocre poets will borrow. But when you get to the 9th circle, it's actually frozen. It's so hot that it's cold, and that when they get to the bottom, Satan is engulfed. He's encased in ice, and you can only see the top half of Lucy. Dante refers to Satan as by 3 names. He calls him Beelzebub, Dis, and Lucifer. He never says Satan. But Dis appears at the beginning, or no, they enter the city of Dis, I think in the 4th circle. But the city of Dis is like where I chose the picture for this. And shouts out to beautiful Ellie for helping me with the artwork for the cover for the stream. Dis is the city. It's essentially a burning castle with like 7 walls, and they have to skirt around it and find a secret entrance and to enter into it, because once you enter in, you can never leave. And I've always thought of the city of Dis as the city of or the city of not, because everything is inverted. Everything is a negative. They're in the absolute negative zone. It's where you see the signpost that everyone will always recognize, which is abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And it makes sense that Dante uses that as the sign over the door into the city of Dis, because they are entering a zone where there is no, it's the opposite of hope. There's hopelessness. There's no hope for them, but they choose to be that way. We'll see a number of characters in the poem, mythological characters. We'll see historical figures, Alexander, Ptolemy, Caesar. We'll see the Furies. We'll see Minos. We'll see the Minotaur. We'll see one of the striking things about the poem is the number of contemporaries that Dante will place in hell. There are even people in the poem that were still living when Dante was alive. They were living in his contemporary with Dante, that he places in hell, and he'll even say he'll question these shades. They're all referred to as shades, by the way, which fits with the mythological shades in Tartarus, but also in a Platonic sort of Gnostic way, that they are the shade, they are the shadow of the self. But it's their souls. And he will come across shades, and he'll say, no, you can't be down here because I know you. You're still up there. And they'll say, no. I was so bad that, the sin that I committed, basically a demon jumped in my body and possessed me, and my soul dropped straight into hell where I am now. And my body still lives up on the earth, which is pretty wild, right? There's humor in the poem. There's a lot of human emotion. Dante is the character. Dante definitely makes himself out to be a person that we can relate to. The poem is an epic poem in so many ways. Number one, it is epic. It's long. It represents a journey, a literal journey and a figurative journey. And it is, it's an odyssey in a number of ways. He will come across Ulysses, by the way, in hell. Ulysses, or Odysseus, is in hell because of his stratagems and because of the fact that he is wrapped up completely in his own journey, despite his wife and son. And it's also national. It's the national poet of Italy, especially in the 13th century or 14th century. And it stands for the values of the time. Dante will place a number of popes in hell, and he is sort of pretty relentless in discussing and describing the deeds of people recent to Dante and people that we will recognize. So, let's discuss, first of all, the 9 circles, the architecture of hell, and what happens. Let's just give an overview. As to what hell is. Yes, I'm going to get into the philosophical and spiritual journey of this. Of course, it is a spiritual journey, and that's one of the points of the contrapasso, is that Dante, in the Augustinian sense, I mean, don't quote me, okay? I'm not an expert, but in the Augustinian, just in the layman's terms, in the Augustinian sense, he is descending in order to ascend, right? Because, I mean, look, that's literally what he does with the Divine Comedy. I'm not offering a value on that. I'm just saying that's what Dante thinks. He goes first through the Inferno, then he will journey through Purgatorio, and then he will end up in Paradiso, right? He is descending he calls it experience, to name it experience, the experience of living and of the sins and of what the sins of hell represent, in order to purify himself to ascend to Paradiso in Dante's vision. So let's talk about the architecture or the design or the blueprint of hell. There are 9 circles, and Dante begins just as an overview of if there's a plot. It's not really a plot because it's a poem, but it's certainly a narrative. So let's discuss, just an overview of what happens so that people may understand what happens in this poem. It begins with Dante as T.S. Eliot said, the dark of the wood. He's in the woods and he's attacked by 3 beasts, like leopards, essentially. Three beasts. I think a leopard is one of them. And they represent, envy, lust. I forget the other one, but we'll get to that later. But he's attacked, and then he suddenly sort of runs into the dark, and he finds the hellmouth, and he is met by Virgil, who's obviously dead, the ghost or the spirit or the shade of the Roman epic poet Virgil. Virgil takes him under his wing and says, "We're going on this trip, we're going on this journey, and we're going to traverse through the Inferno." The Inferno, obviously, infernal fire is hell, and they start off they start off in they cross Acheron, and then they go into Limbo. They will cross over through 9 circles. They cross over the river Styx. They meet Charon. They get into the 3 rings, and then into the 8th circle where they encounter Malebolge, and then finally the 9th circle, the frozen 9th circle. Yeah, the gates of Dis are in the 3rd circle, and then the city of Dis is in the 4th circle. And how, you may ask, is it that Dante and Virgil are able to do this? Wouldn't they be in the world of the poem? Would they be captured by these demons and spirits and shades and left in hell? Well, no, because as Virgil will describe, they are granted a sort of divine pass. The archangel has deemed that they have a pass; they're not to be touched. And this doesn't mean that Virgil doesn't have to. I mean, Virgil's a great guide, because Virgil has to, he's a poet, so he uses his words to sort of barter and make their way into and convince certain demons that they are to be let go, right? That they're to be given a pass. And there's even a part when they encounter the Malebolge, these demons, where the demons are really, they're like pitchforking people, and they really want to take Dante and Virgil, and then Virgil has to say basically, like, look, we've got this pass essentially, and you have to give us an escort. And then so one of the demons says to the other demons, okay, escort him this far. He's not to be touched. And then they do something, and then they kind of come after them, but they hide, and then they make their way into the eighth circle. There's also a part where a nameless archangel will literally like hover past them and open the keys to one of the cities, and then we'll let them pass, and then we'll ascend again. Virgil at one point says that he was in hell when Christ harrowed hell, descended, defeated death, and took the keys and took up Moses, etc. And he mentions Moses and Adam specifically back up to heaven, and he was released. That's what he says. So at the end, of course, they encounter Lucifer. They describe him in the 34th canto, and then they ascend Lucifer's body, and then because of the globe and because of the hemispheres, they end up ascending and then descending. So we have a sort of an as above, so below. And then they descend the legs, and then they end up in the woods. They go out through a split stone, and then they're back in the world. That's what happens in the poem. But it's actually what they encounter in the world of hell that is important. So before we get to that part, we need to discuss, let's see, some of the ideas for the spiritual genesis and the verbiage of the poem. So I'm going to read some of this essay by, let's see, who wrote this essay? John Ferchero. And he says, it follows that there are only two cities, the city of God, where all love him to the exclusion of self, and the city of man, where self-interest makes every sinner an enemy to every other. Let's see, hell is a parody of a city, 0.0 in the scale of cosmic love. Like Augustine's city of man, it is meant to represent social consequences and insatiable desire when it remains earthbound. Dante's Inferno is a vision of the city of man in the afterlife, which is why it contains no glimmer of forgiveness. He says every conversation in hell is charged with irony. Much of what the sinners have to say about their lives or their actions is undermined by their guilt or self-delusion. Their testimony is self-serving, as one would expect of any prisoner's account of his or her conviction, except that here, as we learn from the inscription on the gates, all have received the same sentence with no hope of appeal, and none has been framed. Justice in hell is meant to be objective, measured out by a bureaucratic monster in proportion to the specific gravity of the sin. Such a mechanical administration of punishment leaves no room for judicial error or caprice. So the monster that decides where they go in hell is actually King Minos. You remember Minos from Theseus and the Minotaur? Minos is actually this monster beast man with a dragon tail, and he wraps his tail around his body the number of times where the damned will be sent. So if he wraps around 8 times, they're sent to the 8th circle, and he flings them down into heck, right? As Derek says, flings them down into heck. Let's see. There was Eric Auerbach, who was a critic, and is refuted by Harold Bloom in his reading of Dante. Discusses how the poem is not it's meant to be sort of this post-Enlightenment humanist allegory. But that's sort of refuted by Harold Bloom. But then it says, let's see, a reading such as this runs the risk of ignoring something essential about the poem. The clash between the humanity of the damned and the implacable judgment to which they are subjected is not simply an accident of history. The abyss that separates medieval standards of morality from our own, but rather reflects a fundamental division in Dante's own consciousness. Irony in the Inferno arises from the discrepancy between the perspective of the pilgrim, which is much like ours, and that of the poet, who by journey's end claims to share God's view. He refers to himself as the pilgrim in this a number of times. Let's see. No, let's see. Everyone in there, it must be that God put them there. Yes. This says, yes. Oh, here's the, let's see. The Divine Comedy, the most important part of the poet's biography, however, is his poetry. The great number of the great number of auto citations in Dante's text, passages that clearly hark back to his earlier poetry, are at the same time autobiographical allusions, because Dante refers to himself a number of times in the poem and his own work. The paradox was familiar to Christians who thought of the sin of Adam and Eve precisely as a fortunate fall, felix culpa, inasmuch as it prepared the way for the coming of Christ. This talks about Neoplatonism and Plotinus. Dante's monster embodies a confessional paradox inasmuch as it is an evil, frauds, foul emblems, which nevertheless can be employed for the soul's salvation, provided one trust in providence and abandon one's self-reliance, represented by the rope girdle that the pilgrim tosses into the abyss. Because at one point he's wearing the rope, like a rope girdle from, I think, a Benedictine order that Dante may have been a part of for a while. They ride this this demon Geryon. The journey on the Geryon is a flight to the depths with Virgil as the pilgrim's guide and protector. Let's see. And this talks about Virgil and his guidance. Virgil is the poet of loss, a poet for whom death seems stronger than Aeneas's love for Dido. This comes from the Aeneid. We'll probably cover the Aeneid soon because we need to. We've done Paradise Lost. We might as well, and we've done Beowulf. We've done 2 epics so far. We might as well keep covering epic poems, national epic poems. Of course, the Aeneid is the story of Aeneas, who escapes from the burning city of Troy at the end of the Trojan War, at the end of the Iliad, right? And goes on his own Aeneid or Odyssey, and then he harrows hell. He goes to find Dido, Queen of Carthage. He ends up in Italy, and then Aeneas's descendants will be Romulus and Remus, who will then give birth to the Roman Empire, which is why it's the national poem of Rome. Okay, here we go. Finally, a word should be said about the style in which the poem is written. Dante called it the comedy, the commedia. The adjective divine was added in the 16th century, yes, by scholars. There we go. In antiquity, it was important to adopt the appropriate style for different subject matter, the high or tragic style for the most weighty subjects, and the low or comic for everyday or vulgar subjects. The Gospels were said to have changed all of this by using humble speech, the parables say, or the exchange between Christ and the Samaritan woman at the well, for the weightiest matter of all, our redemption. One could say that the tragic realism with which we are familiar in our own literature, where the profoundest matters can be conveyed in dialectical and vulgar speech, was made possible by the revolution in rhetoric brought about by Christianity, which could represent salvation itself by a glass of water. Dante wrote precisely in the humble speech of Scripture, a language he hoped everyone would understand. He was among the first in the Middle Ages to do so, writing this most serious of poems, not in Latin, as one might have expected, but in the everyday speech of his city. Ultimately, this is a justification for another contemporary translation. The poem is written in a language that we speak now, no matter which language we speak. Okay, so now a few things about this. The actual construction of the poem and what it looks like. So the poem is written in what you call terza rima, okay? And it looks like this. So you see we have three line stanzas, right? We have 3 stanzas, and the rhyme scheme is essentially A, B, A, B, C, B, C, D, C, etc. Now, why is it written in that way? Well, because it is supposed to give the impression to the reader of, I like to think of it like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Because the journey through the Inferno is arduous. Yeah, it's the most difficult journey that these characters will undertake. So they are beginning on their in their three sections, right? Because there are three sections of the Commedia, so it makes sense that it's written in 3-line stanzas. And it's also written in threes because Dante himself had this sort of Gnostic idea of 81 is the perfect age, 9 times 9. Speaking of Gnosticism and alchemy, you will find here that the alchemists are way down in the circles. They're way down. I think they're in the 8th circle of hell. More about that later. But there are 2 of them, right? So it makes sense. There's Dante and there's Virgil. So it makes sense that the ABA represents like basically the 2 feet of one and the one of the other who's guiding them, who's guiding both of them forward, right? So it's like one step, the other step, another step, space. We have a stanza break. So again, 2 steps forward, one step back, slow, arduous journey. Now, the translation that I read here is the reason I like this more than the Shelley version is because the Shelley version sticks to the rhyme scheme, okay, like a strict rhyme scheme. And at times when that happens, the the content of the poem will suffer because Italian is rich in rhyme, right? There are far more words in English than there are in Italian, but far more words rhyme in Italian than in English, if that makes sense. So, in other words, it's easier to have terza rima in Italian and this rhyme scheme because the words all rhyme with one another, right? In English, if you try to do a direct, literal translation of the rhyme scheme, it doesn't work so well, and the content suffers. So what Robert Pinsky does pretty cleverly here is he uses more of like an Anglo-Saxon and Old English variation of rhyme scheme, which is essentially rhyming by alliteration or assonance, right? The repetition of consonant sounds, the repetition of vowel sounds, so that the rhyme is not what most people think of when they think of rhyme. Rhyme is like how people say, like, line and dine, right? That's a perfect rhyme. Yes. There are also half rhymes where the word will rhyme on the page, but it won't rhyme to the ear, but it still rhymes the way that the words look on the page, like they should rhyme. But this is more of what we in English would think of like as an Anglo-Saxon way to rhyme, which is like rhyming through consonants, which most people don't consider a rhyme at all, but it is technically. Okay, so let's begin the poem. And it begins with let's see. Of course, it has some of the most famous opening lines, right? Midway on our life's journey, I found myself in dark woods, the right road lost. To tell about those woods is hard, so tangled and rough and savage that thinking of it now, I feel the old fear stirring. Death is hardly more bitter. Now, there's a lot about this poem that reminds me of Beowulf and of the Seafarer and the Wanderer, which we've covered. I have no idea if Dante would have been privy to those texts, but he certainly is privy to. He is widely read, and he will reference English literature. He'll reference the language of the literature of the troubadours of Provence. He'll reference Latin texts, Greek texts. So he was certainly well read, and it's weird because we know more. Even though Dante lived in the 1300s, we know far more about Dante's own life than we do Shakespeare's life. But that's fitting because this poem is far more personal and represents a personal epic poem than any of Shakespeare's work, because Shakespeare's work represents sort of the gamut of human experience. It represents all. Anybody can find their way through Shakespeare. Also, midway on our life's journey sort of indicates that that Dante was about 35 years old when he wrote the poem, or at least when he started writing the poem, because of what he says is the life expectancy of 70, although he says that the perfect age is 81. Dante, I think, was 56 when he died of malaria. He died on a diplomatic mission, by the way, to from Venice. He went to Venice on a diplomatic mission and caught malaria and died. But anyway, regardless, I found myself in the dark woods. So we start off in the dark and we move towards further darkness. Eventually, in the Commedia, we will end up in light in Paradiso. And also the right road lost. Now, that's interesting. My audience will, my friends here will recognize that, because this poem, if any poem ever, if any work of literature talks about the left-hand path, this is it. Because the way that the poem is constructed, they only turn right, I think, one time in the poem. But the rest of the poem is is specifically and explicitly to the left. They're always moving to the left, which makes sense. They are taking the left-hand path of all left-hand paths down to the bottom of hell to Lucifer, right? You guys, make sure if you're watching this now, especially later, please smash that like. And you know what? While I'm at it, before I get further into the text, I got a couple little super chats here. So oh, sweet. Kristen drops us $5 on Cash App. Thank you to Kristen, of course, always our homegirl Kristen at Slow Boy Whiteboard. Kristen, I've been loving the content recently. What did I watch? I watched one today, and then I watched one yet. Oh, it was about the Giants. It was about the Giants in North America. That was good. Thank you, Kristen. And Derek says $15. He says, "Pay Piggy checking in. By the way, check out my latest poem when you have the time. I think you may like it." Yes, thank you, Derek. I appreciate it, and always happy to look at your poems with you. You guys, if you are a writer out there like Derek is, and you need some, you need somebody else to look at your work or to help you edit or whatever, or to maybe discuss ideas with you, consider dropping me a little fat chat here. And I will certainly help you with that as best I can. I don't know if my help will mean anything to you. Hopefully it will. But if you need another perspective or some more other eyes to look at form and content, I certainly will do that for you. And I appreciate the donation. So thank you so much for that. Yes, thank you, Derek. I will look at that. Yes, and Kristen sends $5. Thank you so much, Kristen. I appreciate you always. Yes. So, you guys, yes, please consider donating and supporting me here at the channel. I could really use it. We could all use it in these tough times, right? And I think maybe the poems that we've been reading recently, in a number of ways, sort of mirror the world in which we find ourselves now. So yes, thank you. And help me to get some more books so I can keep doing this. Of course, I'm always looking for books, and I've got a whole list of works that I need to get so that I can analyze them with you guys. Yes. Derek says gas hit $5 here yesterday. Yeah, I saw, it's like $9 in Cali. And here in Appalachian, it's almost up at $5. So, yeah, I know money's tight. It's tight for everybody. Times are tough and tight for everybody out there. So I certainly appreciate your support. Dante says in the first canto, "I'll tell what I saw, though how I came to enter, I cannot well say. Being so full of sleep, whatever moment it was, I began to blunder off the true path." He says in line 24, "My left foot always lower on the hill." Let's see, page 5 of this book. "As when divine love set those beautiful lights into motion at creation's dawn, at the time of day and season, combined to fill my heart with hope of that beast with festive skin, but not so much that the next sight wasn't fearful. A lion came at me, a leopard came out, and then a lion. His head high as he ran, roaring with hunger, so the air appeared to tremble. Then a grim she-wolf, whose leanness seemed to compress all the world's cravings that had made miserable such multitudes. When I was ruining myself back down to the deep, someone appeared, one who seemed nearly to fade as though from long silence." That reminds me of, Yeats took a lot from Dante, of course, and that particular one, I have a feeling that Yeats stole that particular line for his own poem, After Long Silence. Speech after long silence, it is right, all other lovers being estranged or dead, unfriendly lamplight hid under its shade, the curtains drawn upon unfriendly night, that we descant and yet again descant upon the supreme theme of art and song. Bodily decrepitude is wisdom. Young, we loved each other and were ignorant, Yeats says. If I remember that one. And then he says, I cried to his human shape in that great wasteland. Here we go with Eliot's Wasteland. And of course, Eliot steals the line, I had not thought death had undone so many, straight from Dante. Living man or shade, have pity and help me, whichever you may be. No living man, though once I was, he replied. This is Virgil. He says, I lived in good Augustus's Rome in the day of the false gods who lied. A poet I hymned, Anchises' noble son, it's Aeneas, who came from Troy, was superb. When superb Ilium in its pride was burned. Ilium is Troy, right? That's where we get the Iliad. Also, we get a Genesis here, back up at the top of that page. Divine love set those beautiful lights into motion at creation's dawn. And we also get the lion, the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe. The lion, the leopard, the lion, and the she-wolf. The she-wolf also ties in with Virgil's Aeneid because of the she-wolf who raises Romulus. Of course, Dante himself is Italian. There's not an Italian, so to speak, right? He's a Florentine, but he's on the peninsula of Italy. And also, what was I going to say? And also these sort of represents the portent signs and portents that Caesar sees in Julius Caesar on the night before his assassination. These things always sort of pop up in Roman literature and in here we go. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate you. My dad super chats for some books. Thank you. Appreciate you out there. So let's see. On the next page, 7. Let's see. Her veracity. Let's see. We get the hellhounds. And then we get around line 90, this lean wolf haunting her through every region till he has thrust her back to hell's abyss, where envy first dispatched her on the mission. Therefore, I judge it best that you should choose to follow me. He's speaking to us, the reader. Yeah, for real, Jerry. Dad making it rain. Shouts out to Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies streams. Shouts out to Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies ice streams. That's a bad joke. Jerry be slanging ice out there. He delivers ice, guys. To stores. Okay. Let's see. He mentions the abyss and he speaks to us directly in the second person a number of times throughout the poem. Here he tells us directly, therefore I judge it best that you should choose to follow me and I will be your guide away from here and through an eternal place to hear the cries of despair. This is his thesis for the poem. And to behold ancient tormented spirits as they lament in chorus the second death they must abide. Then you shall see those souls who are content to dwell in fire because they hope someday to join the blessed. Well, actually, no, they are content. They are content to dwell in fire forever in the poem. Toward whom, if your ascent continues, your guide will be one worthier than I. When I must leave you, you will be with her. Okay, because he then this is Dante speaking to us. This is also Virgil speaking to Dante. And he says that once we get out of the Inferno, you'll have a different guide. Eventually he ends up with Beatrice. When I must leave you, you will be with her. For the emperor who governs from on high, wills I not enter his city. He's talking about God. Where none may appear who lived like me in rebellion to his law. Because Virgil lived in rebellion to God's law because he lived in the BC era prior to Christ, prior to the birth of Christ. So he says he lives in rebellion, but that in his kingdom, his city, his seat of all, happy is the soul he chooses for that place. I, Dante says, I, poet, Please, by the God you did not know, help me escape this evil that I face, and worse, lead me to witness what you have said, St. Peter's gate and the multitude of woes. Then he set out, and I followed where he led. Okay. So then we go in the second canto, down to hell in order to rise to heaven, he says, later in his journey on, let's see, and he does kind of a quasi invocation of the muse. He says in Canto 2 in the second stanza, to struggle with my journey and with the spirit of pity, which flawless memory will redraw. O muses, O genius of art, O memory, whose merit has inscribed inwardly those things I saw. Help me fulfill the perfection of your nature I commenced. Poet, take my measure now. Appraise my powers before you trust me to venture through the deep passage where you would be my guide. So Dante is a supreme wordsmith and craftsman. The reason that he says "oh" 3 times is because, remember, we've discussed in Shakespeare, and T.S. Eliot also steals this, right? Remember with "oh," he says in The Wasteland, "Oh, oh, 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 that Shakespearean rag." Oh, we've said many times here now that the letter O is a prime example of what poetry is supposed to be, because the lines are what we call real, like they're prime real estate. Hey, it's beautiful. It's really, they're prime real estate because all the words and the syllables matter in the meter of the line. So when you have a word like "oh," which is just a single syllable and a single letter, it has to represent something bigger than what it is. The O represents the yawning gulf. It also represents the way that the mouth looks when you say "oh," and what it represents with you uttering out in this cry of woe or exasperation or exclamation is supposed to mirror the O, or the circular nature of the Inferno itself, because he's going to go down into the 9 circles. And it also represents the human being going into the what Shakespeare would call the yawning gulf, right? The grave itself, the earth opens up, you dig the grave, and you go down into the grave, right? So he also uses 3 of them because 3 times 3, 9 circles of hell. And he says, carrying confirmation of that faith which opens the way with salvation at its end, right? So Dante is himself saying that he's going on this journey really in a way to find salvation and faith, right? He's going to experience the torments of hell, to which, death undoes so many, so that he will eventually, he will in a visceral way feel his salvation, which is sort of Gnostic in a way, right? But he will feel his salvation and make his way ordo ab Caio. But he says, I am no Aeneas or Paul, not I, nor others think me of such worth. And therefore I have my fears of playing the fool to embark on such venture. You are wise. You know my meaning better than I can tell. And then, like one who chooses his own choice and thinking again undoes what he has started, so I became a nullifying unease, overcame my soul on that dark slope and voided the undertaking I had so quickly embraced. If I understand, the generous shade retorted, that's Virgil, cowardice grips your spirit, which can twist a man away from the noblest enterprise, as a trick of vision startles a shying beast. To ease your burden of fear, I will disclose why I came here and what I heard that compelled me first to feel compassion for you. It was a lady's voice that called me where I dwelled in limbo. A lady so blessed and fairly featured, I prayed her to commend me. Her eyes outjeweled the stars in splendor. So in other words, he's saying when he was in limbo, a lady who is going to end up being Beatrice, Dante's Beatrice, who's one of the great, ladies in all of literature. In fact, Dante's Beatrice is basically the Gnostic Sophia, because he calls her perfection in human form. And she's going to essentially she's going to reunite him with the other, right? She's going to reunite him with God, but it's really more of like a demiurge, right? And what was I going to say about Beatrice? Let's see. He says so Beatrice asks him to rescue Dante because she sees him close to death with these three beasts, and then he's gonna oblige and take him on this journey. And when I return before my Lord, he will hear your praises told. Okay, so Virgil a number of times in the poem will discuss how he's like, look, man, you gotta tighten up. Stop being so fearful. Like, I'm your guide. We have this divine past to be down here. You need to chill. But it's only natural that Dante would be scared because he's going into hell, right? He says on page Canto 2, about line 72, he says, God the Creator has by his mercy made me such that I cannot feel what you suffer. None of this fire assails me. There you go. Do not heed the pity of his cries. And do your eyes not see death near in him? In a flood, the ocean itself can boast no power to surpass. Right here, we have this nautical theme, 25 Rogans. Yeah, somebody drop me 25 Rogans, you guys. Somebody drop me 25 Rogans or Dugan coin. I need that Dugan coin. I need that Putin coin. Page 17, therefore, what is this? Why should you hold back? Why be a coward rather than bolder, freer? Since in the court of heaven, for your sake, 3 ladies watch, and words of mine have promised as good, a good as great as you might seek. As flowers bent and shrunken by night at dawn unfold and straighten on your snake, brightened by sunlight, so I grew strong again. Good courage coursing through my heart. I spoke like one set free. How full of true compassion was she who helped me. How courteous and quick were you to follow her bidding, and your narration has restored my spirit. Now, on, for I feel eager to go with you and cleave to my first intention. From now, we two shall share one will together. This is like what I was talking about at the beginning, like sort of the idea of the syzygy. Not really, the astronomical syzygy as well, right? With the moon and the sun tethered, but this is like the two bodies in one. They're sharing one will because he's sort of giving over his will to Virgil, which represents him overall handing over his will to God throughout the entire comedy. Oh, I haven't said, by the way, this is random, but I haven't said, why is it called the Divine Comedy? Why is it called the Commedia? You may have been asking that for a while now, or may have wondered that. It's called the comedy, the Divine Comedy, because, as we've discussed before, especially in the Shakespeare streams, tragedy, comedy, and history are the 3 genres of Shakespeare, and what separates a tragedy and a comedy is essentially the happy ending. Shakespearean comedies are so close to being tragic, as we discussed in it wasn't a Much Ado About Nothing stream, but we did discuss Much Ado About Nothing, and I probably need to do that as a whole. That'd be a good one to do, but what separates them is just this thin line, right? That things don't turn out badly. And it's called the Divine Comedy because simply for the reason that, well, number one, because it is written in a low language in the vernacular, in the Tuscan vernacular of this Florentine, but also because it has a happy ending. That's it, right? A comedy represents the hope of a happy ending, and the Commedia ends with Dante going to Paradiso, going to paradise, to heaven, right? Okay, so let's see. And entered that deep and savage road. So now in Canto 3, they enter hell. Okay, they're going into the entrance, the hell mouth, and the first circle of hell. And it says in all caps here, through me you enter into the city of woes. Through me you enter into eternal pain. Through me you enter the population of loss. Justice moved my high maker, in power divine, wisdom supreme, love primal. No things were before me, not eternal. Eternal I remain. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. So even on the entrance way to hell, right, there is mention of God, right? They cannot escape God's justice. God put them there. These but we'll see that the people inside want to be there, right? They've willed to do this. They are out of the light. They are out of the light by choosing. It says, these words I saw inscribed in some dark color over a portal because a port, right? In Latin, the port is the door, but they're also entering into what we think of as a portal, another world. Master, I said, make clear their meaning, which I find too hard to gather. So Dante he's like this. He kind of begins as like this almost childlike figure where he can't comprehend what he's seeing, what's happening. So he has to ask his master poet. He's the apprentice, and he has a master poet to explain it to him. He says, all fear must be left here and cowardice die. Together we have arrived where I've told you. Here you will behold the wretched souls who've lost the good of intellect. Then, with good cheer in his expression to encourage me, he placed his hand on mine. So, trusting to my guide, I followed him among things undisclosed. The sighs, groans, and laments at first were loud. So the first thing he hears, we've talked about the importance of auditory imagery, right? An image is a word, or in literature, an image is a word, phrase that appeals to the senses. It's not simply a picture. And some of the strongest imagery, especially in Dante, is auditory imagery. We've discussed the importance of auditory imagery, especially in relation to serial killers and DID. But the first thing that he is subjected to in terms of his senses is the sound of hell, resounding through starless air. Oh, the star is important here because all three of sections of Dante's Divine Comedy end with the word stars. But this part, he says at the beginning, is starless. Air, I began to weep. Strange languages, like a babble, right? And they come across the giant Nimrod, by the way. Horrible screams, words imbued with rage or despair, cries as of a troubled sleep or of a tortured shrillness. They rose in a coil of tumult, along with noises like the slap of beating hands, all fused in a ceaseless flail that churns and frenzies that dark and timeless air like sand in a whirlwind. And I, my head in a swirl of error, cried, Master, what is this I hear? What people are these whom pain is overcome? So the coil, the swirl, and the whirlwind are all words that reflect the architecture of hell itself, right? Because it is we'll see actual whirlwinds and maelstroms in hell, but because it is circular, right? So again, here is a perfect example of why Dante is the master poet, because the form, the way that the words sound and that they look on the page matches the content, meaning the actions within the poem, the things that are occurring, and they produce meaning. And the meaning is the overall impression of this guy journeying through hell, like on his life's journey, midway on his life's journey into literal hell. And this is the sorrowful state of souls unsure, whose lives either earned neither honor nor bad fame. And they are mingled with angels of that base sort, not based. They're not based, they're base sort, who neither rebellious to God nor faithful to him chose neither side, but kept themselves apart. Now heaven expels them, not to mar its splendor, and hell rejects them, lest the wicked of heart take glory over them. So here in the first circle are where the angels from the war in heaven, when Lucifer rebelled against God, as discussed in Paradise Lost, and then is cast headlong, hurling into the earth, right? There are people who keep the side of St. Michael and the archangel. And then there are people who take Lucifer's side. And then there are angels. And then there are angels who stay in the middle. And those angels are cast out because they are a blight. They're filthy. So they're cast out into the first circle here, but hell also rejects them. So they're sort of midway. The Arthurian legends and a lot of Celtic mythology, post-Christian Celtic mythology, and the Arthurian legends will discuss how, that's the origin of fairies, sprites, and other such like sort of metaphysical creatures on Earth that occur in those stories because they were somewhere in the middle. He says, Master, what agony is this that makes them keen their grief with so much force? I will make brief answer. They have no hope of death, but a blind life so abject they envy any other fate. To all memory of them, the world is deaf. Mercy and justice disdain them. Let us not speak of them. Look and pass on. I looked again. A whirling banner sped at such a rate it seemed as it might never stop. Behind it a train of souls so long that I would not have thought death had undone so many. There we get T.S. Eliot's I would not have thought death had undone so many in his description of the wasteland. And also there, I wrote a little note here. Indecision mirrors their judgment. They neither death nor life. They can't make the decision for salvation. We also get images from the black hole, which, if you haven't seen Disney's Black Hole, of course, go back and watch Jay and Jamie's analysis of the black hole. What is it, 1979? 1979's Disney's Black Hole. And Rob Ager also did a recent analysis of the black hole, which was good. But I would say that, if you've ever seen that film, it is dark. And the final, I think I can honestly say that the last scene, or rather the penultimate scene in that film, where Maximilian, and played by Maximilian Schell, is body and soul united with the killer robot, standing on the promontory looking over Malebolge in hell. It's obviously hell, right? And they're looking and they see the train of souls, just like Dante describes it, is so terrifying. It's crazy that is a children's movie, because it's so terrifying. I mean, I saw that when I was, I don't know, probably 2 or 3. And I've always remembered that. But what other, what a perfect image for the ultimate outcome of transhumanism, right? Of technocratic transhumanism, because this scientist is melded with his robot body and he ends up in hell. Let's see. Beyond all doubt, this was the dreary guild, repellent both to God and his enemies. Hapless ones never alive, their bare skin galled by wasps and flies. Blood trickling down the face, mingling with tears for harvest underfoot by writhing maggots. That all of these are eager to cross over. Can you tell me by what law and who they are? He answered, these things you will discover when we have paused at Acheron's dismal shore. So what's interesting about this part, the part that I just read there, is that this really explains the fact that these souls are in hell by choice, right? I mean, they're in hell by divine justice, but their actions, their free will actions, echo, as Russell Crowe says, echo in eternity, right? Because the people who are in the first circle of hell, they long, in the poem, they long to be in the city of Dis. They long to be in hell proper, right? They're not even content to be on the edge of hell. They want to go all the way, but even hell rejects them. And the writhing maggots and the flies and all that is one example of like an early, disgusting hell image in the poem. But it's also emblematic of we haven't seen demons like tormenting souls yet. And we don't see that really until we get to the 7th circle of hell with the Malebolge, who are like a class of demon. For most of this poem, actually, it's striking the number of times where we see shades who are violent to themselves. Yeah, there's all kinds of massive, writhing, swirling mass of people who are biting at each other. And, you remember that scene in, if you've ever seen that movie, it's like, I think it's 1997, What Dreams May Come, with, Robin Williams. Robin Williams. Remember that movie, you guys? Have you seen that? Because a lot of the imagery in that film is taken from Dante's Inferno. Of course, it's based on a theosophical book. I haven't read the book, but I know it's a theosophical New Age book. But there is a scene where Robin Williams has a guide, and he's crossing water, and they're like stepping on the faces of souls who are trying to get their head above water and breathe. And that's straight from the Inferno. But apart from that, most people are violent to like they're eating their own heads. They're always gnawing and scratching at their own bodies. And the reason is because they are violent toward themselves. Dante will explain in this poem also that violence is necessarily involves three people, as he says in the poem. It involves violence or hatred towards oneself, towards God, and towards another person. One of the interesting things about this poem that you may not know is that the sins of physical violence are like higher up, because we're going lower, right? Are higher up in hell than what puts them down further into the Inferno. In other words, murder is not as bad, so to speak, as certain other sins. And spoiler alert: the ninth circle of hell, the worst sin in Dante's Inferno, is the sin of betrayal. And we'll see when we get to the ninth circle that the characters who inhabit the ninth circle are the worst of betrayers. In fact, when we get to Lucifer, right? Lucifer being the embodiment of betrayal, the betrayal of all betrayals. He has three faces, which is an inversion of the Trinity. And in his three faces, he is gnawing on three people forever. And they are considered, by Dante, they are the three worst traitors. The main one, of course, is Judas, right? Judas is the main one whose head is forever in the mouth of Satan, and whose legs are sort of sticking out and flailing. And then, of course, in Dante's view, we have the other two. He's an Italian, so we have Brutus and Cassius in the other two mouths, right? Let's see. Let's keep going here. They meet Karen, right? Not Karen. She's remember 2020? Karen. No, they meet Karen, like Charon, who takes them across the river Styx. And Karen says, essentially, there is probably some relation though between those two, right? Yeah, I'm sitting in the dark with my light on the French fry aisle, you guys, at the Mallwart. We have the best. I have the best French fries in all of Walmart. Everybody in the other pods envies me here. So they meet Karen, and Karen takes them across. Karen takes them across the river Styx, and he says, essentially, Virgil tells him, "No, God said that we have a pass." Let's see. Oh, page 25. The damned hurry to their damnation. They want to be there. As a trained falcon to cross to the other side of the dark water, and before one throng can land on the far shore on this side, new souls crowd. My son, said the gentle master, here are joined the souls of all who die in the wrath of God from every country, all of them eager to find their way across the water. For the goad of divine justice spurs them so. Their fear is transmuted to desire. Souls who are good never pass this way. Therefore, if you hear Karen complaining at your presence, consider what that means. It means that Dante's he seems to be all right, right? Then the earth of that grim shore began to shake so violently, I shudder and sweat, recalling it now. A wind burst up from the tear-soaked ground to erupt red light and batter my senses. And so I fell as though seized by sleep. Now, sleep is not just sleep, but we think of sleep, the sleep of death, right? In Hamlet, we think of Macbeth. Going back, remember my Macbeth stream? Go back to my Macbeth stream. That's what started us all here. Remember in Macbeth, he says, "Sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more." Right, and we also have sleep being morphine or Morpheus, right? Because they're going into the region of the shades of Pluto, Tartarus, and Morpheus. Yes, in the underworld, into the big sleep. And let's see. Oh, also the trained falcon to cross to the other side. The falcon cannot hear the falconer, right? Is where Yeats got this from the Second Coming, the poem Second Coming. We've analyzed the Second Coming. Go back to my Yeats stream on that. See, Canto 4. Breaking the deep sleep that filled my head, a heavy clap of thunder startled me up as though by force. With rested eyes, I stood peering to where I was. In truth, the lip above the chasm of pain, which holds the din of infinite grief. Din is an archaic word for the clattering sounds, right? Remember it in Julius Caesar? No, that's the dint. Behold, now you feel the dint of pity. This is din, though. The infinite grief, a gulf so dark and deep and murky, right? Again, we have this nautical image. And murky that though I gazed intently down into the canyon, I could see nothing below. Now we descend into the sightless zone. Thanks for posting that link. Jeff, thank you to all my homies out there with me right now. Appreciate you. Yes, and if you're watching this later and you're just tuning in, please make sure you smash that like and consider supporting me. Really appreciate you guys. We're doing some. I think we're doing some good stuff here, right? We've been doing some. Yeah, the Lank Kang, says Eliana, who's the Lank Queen. I think we've been doing some good work here, you guys. We've been doing some important works in the canon of literature. We've got a lot of videos now, so we're going to keep on going. People here suffer that paints my face this color of pity, which you mistake for fear. Pity and fear because tragic. This is the Aristotelian tragedy, right? Now on our long road urges us forward, and he entered the abyss's first engirdling circle. It's also, I just realized it's also interesting on page 27 in Canto 4 that he says engirdling circle, because the circles of hell sort of echo out from the fall of Lucifer. In other words, Dante describes it how Lucifer is cast headlong into the earth. Well, Milton says cast headlong into the earth, but Dante describes it in other words. But Dante says essentially that in the 33rd and 34th canto that when Satan is hurled down from heaven, he falls to the bottom of the universe, and he's on one side of the globe, and that is what essentially that the land sort of shies away from him on the other side of the globe, and that you imagine like the concentric or echoing rings, like from a bomb blast. So all the rings sort of go outwards from Satan, and that it's girdling because Satan is frozen in the frozen lake in the middle of his body. So it's like his loins. So therefore, the rest of hell sort of it's like a girdle. It girdles him. Notice how there's like unity and variety in this poem, right? I mean, will someone super chat BLA and ask him to cover Pride in the Name of Love? How about Stop in the Name of Love? No, I hate that song. Let's see. They did not sin. If they have merit, it can't suffice without baptism. Portal to the faith you maintain. Some lived before, here's Virgil saying, some lived before the Christian faith so that they did not worship God aright. And I am one of these. Through this, no other fault, we are lost, afflicted only by this one way, that having no hope, we live in longing. I heard these words with heartfelt grief that seized in me, knowing how many worthy souls endured suspension in that limbo. Dear sir, my master, I began wanting to be reassured in the faith that conquers every error. Did ever anyone go forth from here by his own good or perhaps another's to join the blessed afterward? So here he describes where he was in limbo and he saw Christ in the harrowing of hell. He says, he understood my covert meaning and said, I was new to this condition when I beheld a mighty one, which is capitalized on the page, a mighty one who descended here, arrayed with a crown of victory. And he recalled back from this place the shade of our first parent and his son Abel, and other shades who dwelled in limbo. Noah and Moses, the obedient giver of laws, went with him, and Abraham, the patriarch. King David and Israel went, and Israel's sire and children, and Rachel, for whom he labored so long, and many others. And his coming here made them blessed and rescued them. Know this, no human soul was saved till these, Dante says, or Virgil says to Dante. Let's see. Nor did they go through the hemisphere of darkness. Okay, here they come upon the walled city. I will not give breath silence as fitting now as speech was there. At length, a noble castle blocked our path, encircled 7 times by a barrier of lofty walls and defended round about. Let's see. I was just thinking of that song. You ever heard that song, that gospel song that Elvis sings it best? John, you ever heard that song? 48 angels to the city, oh, spread wide. You ever heard that song? Let's see. He says, and after that, I passed through 7 gateways with the sages. We came to a fresh green meadow where we met a group of people with grave, deliberate gazes and manners of great authority. They spoke sparingly and in gentle, courtly voices. We drew aside to a place where we could look from a spacious, well-lit height and view them all. On that enameled green I saw, and take glory within me for having seen them still, the spirits of the great. I saw Electra, among whom I well knew his shades were those of Aeneas and of Hector, and Caesar, who wore his armor falcon-eyed. I saw that Brutus from whom Tarquin fled, not Brutus, but Brutus, one of the early Romans, right? One of the founders of Rome. I saw Lucretia, Julia, Marcia, Cornelia, and sitting at a distance separately, I saw lone Saladin of Arabia, which is pretty recent to Dante, right? In the Crusades. Later on, he will see Mohammad in one of the lower circles of hell as a schismatic. I saw nearest him in front Plato and Socrates. I saw Democritus, who strove to show the world his chance. Zeno, Empedocles, Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras we just covered in. Where was Anaxagoras? That was in one of our streams recently. Thales, Heraclitus, Diogenes, the collector of antiquities of things, and Orpheus, Cicero, Linus, Seneca the moralist, Euclid the geometer, Ptolemy, Hippocrates. I saw so many, I cannot tally the list. Oh, it was in Blood Meridian. Let's see. Again, I see air tremble and come to a part that has no light inside it. Okay, now they enter the second circle. So I descended from first to second circle, which spurs more lamentation. Here they come across Minos. Okay, so let's see. It says, Minos, great connoisseur of sin, discerns for every spirit its proper place in hell. Remember, Minos in the myths in Ovid. Minos constructs the labyrinth and places the man-beast ball figure the Minotaur in the labyrinth, and then he locks up Daedalus, who constructs the labyrinth within it. Daedalus and Icarus escape with the wings, remember? But Minos demands the sacrifice of 7 Virgins and Boys every year to feed the Minotaur. And Minos is in hell, and he is the one who is sort of the enforcer and sends people down to their circles. Okay, let's see. Let's see. A crowd is waiting here, and each one learns his judgment and is assigned a place in hell. They tell, they hear, and down they all are cast. You who have come to sorrow's hospice, think well, said Minos, who at the sight of me had paused to interrupt his solemn task mid-feed. Beware how you come in and whom you trust. Don't be deceived, because the gate is wide, right? Yeah, the gate to the city of Dis is wide, right? Which is the inversion of the threading the eye of the needle, right? Let's see. All light is mute with a bellowing like the ocean, turbulent in a storm of warring winds. The hurricane of hell in perpetual motion, sweeping the ravaged spirits as it rends, twists, and torments them. Driven as if to land, they reach the ruin, groaning, tears, lament, and cursing of the power of heaven. Of course, these damned souls, right, are out of the light of grace by choice, and they curse heaven, right? Maybe they should have prayed. Maybe they should have asked for forgiveness and salvation. I learned may we all do that. I learned they suffer here who sinned in carnal things, their reason mastered by desire, suborned as winter starlings riding on their wings form crowded flocks, so spirits dip and veer, foundering in the wind's rough buffetings, upward or downward, driven here and there, will never cease from pain nor hope of rest. And this is the sin. This is like the circle of lechery, right? And the sins of lust. Cleopatra and Helen, who caused a great many evil years, and great Achilles, the hero whom love slew in the last battle. Paris and Tristan and Isolde, not beautiful Tristana, not our friend beautiful Tristana from Primal Edge Health. Shouts out to our homie at Primal Edge Health. Go and watch Primal Edge Health and his recent stream on demons. Again, that's a great stream. Go watch all of his channel. Based. This is Tristan from Tristan and Isolde. And of course, Tristan and Isolde is the precursor for Romeo and Juliet. We did a Romeo and Juliet stream here, guys. He pointed out by name 1,000 souls whom love had parted from our life or more, whom I heard my teacher tell the roles of knights and ladies of antiquity, half lost in its coils. He talks about Francesca and Lancelot. So he's aware. Dante is well read in the Arthurian stories. Of course, probably not in Le Mort d'Arthur, but in what do you call it? Hold on, I got it right up here. Lancelot du Lac and who is it that wrote the other one? I'll think of it in a second. Anyway, the early and Arthurian stories. Let's see. He said Dante self-references in Canto 5. One day for pleasure. Got a squeaky chair here. One day for pleasure, we read of Lancelot by love constrained. And then Dante references himself in his own poems, his love poems. Canto 6 is the third circle, and there is a cold and heavy rain. I'm in the third circle, a realm of cold and heavy rain, a dark, accursed torrent, eternally poured with changeless measure and nature. Steadily through the shadowy air of hell, the soil they drench gives off a putrid odor. So now we have like the first olfactory images, and odors play a huge role in this, obviously, because they're in fetid hell. See the shadowy air of hell, the soil gives off putrid color. Three-headed Cerberus, monstrous and cruel. And then they see talons on Cerberus's hands. He claws the horde of spirits. He flays and quarters them in the rain. The wretches, howling like dogs where they are mired and pelted, squirm about again and again, turning to make each side a shield for the other. Seeing us, Cerberus made his three mouths yawn. Remember the yawning gulf, to show his fangs, his reptile body a quiver in all its members. Cerberus, I wrote my note here, Cerberus is in the gluttonous circle, Canto 6, the third circle, the circle of gluttony, because he ravages the earth. Everyone in here is like either eating themselves, or Cerberus is eating them, or Cerberus is eating clumps of dirt that Virgil distracts him with. Let's see. He talks about the triple sparks of envy, greed, and pride. I think, is that what the three beasts at the beginning represent? I can't remember. I long to know if they feel heaven's sweetness or infernal poison. Virgil says their souls are among the blackest in hell, with different faults that weigh them in the pit. If you descend that far, you may see them all, but pray you, when you return to earth's sweet light, recall my memory there to the human world. Now I respond, speak more. Master, these torments, tell me, will they increase after the judgment, like after the last judgment, or lessen, or merely endure, burning as much as now? He said, in this, go back to your science, which teaches that the more a creature is perfect, the more it perceives the good, and likewise pain. The accursed people here can never come to true perfection. Instead, they can expect to come closer than that now. As they get closer to the perfection of the last judgment, they will also be more aware of their own sin, but they will revel in their own sin. And then they come across Plutus, or Pluto, the great enemy, and they confront him. Let's see. Okay. The next part, Canto 7, is this phrase that says, Papa Satan, Alepe. Pluto began in a guttural, clucking voice, which is unintelligible. Scholars have tried to figure out what that directly means. But it's supposed to be a kind of gibberish, because here in this circle, they come across greed and they come across avarice, and those who are bent by, for instance, I think this is where they find Nimrod, and everyone's babbling. But of course, the guy's calling out to Satan, and also, let's see. Says, don't let fear harm you. Whatever power he has cannot prevent us climbing down this rock. Then turning back toward that swollen face, he answered, silence, accursed wolf. Attack your own insides with your devouring rage, bound for the pit. This is no causeless trek. It is willed above, where Michael wreaked revenge on pride's rebellion. Hell yes. Virgil rebuking this guy, right? He's telling him where Michael put him. Let's see. Just as sails swollen with wind, as soon as the mast is snapped, collapsed, and plunged, that savage beast fell shrinking to the ground. So we descended to the fourth defile to experience more of that despondent land, the sacks that sacks up all the universe's ill. Justice of God. Who is it that heaps together such peculiar torture and travail? The sacks is also a pun because of avarice. Right, sacks of gold. At the circles facing points, line 90 in Canto 7, line 40, that marked division between opposite faults. Those bare of head were clerics, cardinals, popes, in whom the passion of avarice had wrought excess. Among these, master, I'm sure I'll recognize some who were thus polluted. Wrongness in how to give and how to have took the fair world from them and brought them this. Their ugly brawl, which words need not retrieve. Now you can see, my son, how ludicrous and brief are all the goods in fortune's ken, which humankind contend for. You see from this how all the gold there is beneath the moon, or all that ever was, could not relieve one of these weary souls. So here is where they get the, Catholic priests who were avaricious, and end up. Now this is different from simony. The sin of simony is way down in hell, right? Dispensing grace for money. Page 57 of this book, My Teaching. He who made all of heaven's features in his transcendent wisdom gave them guides, so each part shines on all the others, all nature's illumination apportioned. Illuminate, confirm. And then we see, let's see. Oh, here I wrote cacophony, the din of language, unable to speak whole words, because, let's see, it says they cross sticks, and within that bog, all naked and muddy, with looks of fury, striking each other with a hand, but also with their heads, chests, feet, and backs, teeth tearing piecemeal. My kindly master explained, these are the souls whom anger overcame, my son. Know also that under the water, right, are whose sighing makes these bubbles come that pock the surface everywhere you look. Lodged in the slime, they say. Once we were grim and sullen in the sweet air above that took a further gladness from the play of the sun. Inside us, we bore Acadia's dismal smoke. We have this black mire now to be sullen in. This canticle they gargle from the craw, unable to speak whole words. We traveled on through a great arc of swamp between that slough and the dry bank, all the while with eyes turned towards those who swallow the muck below. And then at length we came to a tower's base. Now, Dante, if you notice, the language in here is cacophonous, right? We have the tearing piecemeal. We also have the sinister slime, the sighing, the surface, sweet smoke. We have black, the cacophonous black, canticle, gargle, and crawl. The language is this is the best of poetry, right? We have the best words in the best order, the best sounds, right? And we have sounds are almost onomatopoetic, right? They echo the action that they mirror. And the language is violent because it's almost babbling, because they are babbling for breath. And they are clawing at the surface. Let's see, page 61. Okay, page 61, he says they're on fetid waves. And the dead channel. This is where I really started to annotate the book for these liquid images. That one is repeated on page 91, which is in, let's see, Canto 11. He says, for above us in the skies, the fish are quivering at the water's edge, and the whole wagon lies over chorus. So, in other words, the sky is quivering with fish in Canto 11 because it's this nautical abyssal image of the ocean. They're looking up and it's like they see fish above them in the ocean, but they're at the bottom of the world. But they're always like crossing waves, fetid waves. Page 63, we have self-deceivers and furious shades. Page 65 in Canto 8. A city draws near whose name is Dis. Remember, right? In my view, I mean, I'm sure this is a common view, but in my view, Dis. First of all, Dante names the city right for the person. So Beelzebub, Lucifer, Satan is Dis, but also Dis is the inversion. Dis is not. Dis is the un. Dis, the city of Dis is like where the inversion of all that's good goes. It's the city of not. Right. A city draws near, his name is Dis, of solemn citizenry and mighty garrison. Already clear are mosques. I see them there within the valley, baked red as though just taken from fire. It is fire blazing eternally inside of them that makes them so appear within this nether hell. We had progressed into the deep dug moats that circle near the walls of the bleak city, which seem to cast of solid iron. The iron because, it's like the iron and the adamantine chains of Milton. Who is this? Who'd go without death through the kingdom of the dead and my wise master made a sign. Right? He's flashing the old Jeff. At this point, Virgil's flashing him the old lion's paw, right? And to show that he desired to speak with him aside. And then they tempered their great disdain a bit, answering, no, he's flashing him a Masonic hand sign, right? On his Gnostic quest. Now, you by yourself, you may come inside, but let that other depart who dares set foot within this kingdom. Let him retrace alone his foolish way. Try if he can, is directly from Beowulf. You remember when he says that in Beowulf? Try if he can, and let you remain here. You have guided up. It's weird because I think this was, no, it wasn't published the same year as Shamasine's Beowulf, but it was around the same time when Pinsky's Inferno and Shamasine's Beowulf translation were both published in the 90s. Wow, the 90s was a great time for retranslating these classic works. You judge, oh reader, oh, remember the sound, oh, and then he speaks directly to us, the reader. If I did not lose heart or believe then, hearing that cursed voice, that I would never return from there, oh, my dear guide, who has restored my confidence 7 times over, 7 times because the 7 walls of the city of Dis, and drawn me out of peril, stay at my side. Do not desert me now like this, undone, even if we can go no further. Let us instead retrace our steps together, Dante says to Virgil. That nobleman who led me there then told me, do not fear, none can deprive us of the passage. One God has willed for us to have. Wait for me here and feed your spirit hope and comfort. Remember, I won't abandon you in the nether sphere. So he goes away and leaves me, the gentle father, while I remain in doubt and yes and no vying in my head. So Virgil goes off and he finds a secret gate. Some demon's going to, not a demon, but a demon's going to lead him. A shade is going to lead him to a secret gate into the city of Dis, which is allegorical, right? Because the gate is wide, because it's so easy to fall into sin, and because, virtue is hard, right? Vice is easy, so to speak. And because there's always another way into sin, right? Deception. Not saying that's, obviously that's good. I'm saying that's what it's saying here, right? Don't be sinning out there. Let's see. Canto 9. He says, he paused. Let's see. The outward color cowardice painted me when I beheld my leader turning back, repressed his own new pallor more hurriedly. He paused with an attentive air, but like one listening, not watching, for the eye saw little in air so dark and fog so thick. So again, we have the auditory images because they can't see. And then he says, his sentences beginning, how he strove to hide his sentences beginning with its close in different words from those he would have said. Scaring me nonetheless, each broken phrase leading me to a meaning perhaps much worse than any it held. So we have Dante's own commentary on syntax here and the changing of the sentence structure, which is mirrored in the words that he himself speaks. They draw, there's closer to the spirit of Judas in the 9th circle. Then they have an olfactory image. So strong a stench surrounds the city of woe, we cannot enter now except with wrath. And then they come across 3 hellish furies, and the hellish furies are essentially the weird sisters. They also come across Hecate and the Gorgon, the weird sisters. Remember the weird sisters of Macbeth? Page 73, Canto 9. So I saw more than 1,000 souls of the ruin flee before one who strode across the Styx, draw shot as on land. With his left hand, he cleared the polluted air before his face. And only in that annoyance did he seem tired. I knew assuredly he was sent to us from heaven. And I turned my head to regard the master who signaled that I should be mute and bow before him. This is Archangel coming down here. A race cast out from heaven, exiles despised there. Why this insolence? Why do you kick against the will, God's will, whose end cannot be thwarted, and whose punishments many times over have increased your pain? What use to butt at what the fates dispense? Remember your Cerberus's throat and chin, for just this reason, still are stripped of fur. Then he turned back on the filthy path again, not speaking a word to us, but with the air of one whom other matters must concern than those who stand before him. He goes back up to heaven. And here again, let's see, and sepulchered here arch heretics lie. They come across Epicurus in Canto 10. It says, here Epicurus lies with all his followers who call the soul dead when the flesh dies. Yeah, put Epicurus in hell. Let's see. Then others are in a blind prison. Let's see. I'm going to skip forward to, Canto 11. I hold Pope Anastasius drawn by Photinus from the proper path. My son, within these rocks, 3 lesser circles fall, each one below another. Like those you have seen, and all of them are packed with accursed souls, in order that hereafter the sight alone may be sufficient. The end of every wickedness that feels heaven's hatred is injustice. In humankind, as its peculiar vice, it angers God more. So the fraudulent are lower and suffer more unhappiness. The whole first circle is for the violent, but because violence involves a deed against 3 persons, its apportionment and fabrication are in 3 rings. So that the architecture, architectonic plan of hell mirrors the contrapasso, right? The sin that they have committed. Somebody just dropped me a fat PayPal. Thank you from our homeboy Thomas Henderson, who drops $10. Appreciate you, Thomas Henderson. I know I would say Thomas is getting a lot out of this, but hold on, they're reconnecting. How's my connection, guys? Can you hear me? There we go. Now we should be back. Red line in there for a second. Yeah, I would say Thomas is getting a lot out of this, but Thomas is one of our high IQ residents here. So this is probably old hat to him. But thank you, Thomas. I appreciate you so much. So again, the first ring is the harbor of torment. This is the ring within the circle. The first ring is the harbor of torment for the homicides and those who strike out wrongfully, the spoiler, robber, and plunder in various companies. One may lay violent hands on his own being, suicides. Repent in vain within the second ring. Violence against the deity too exists. To deny and blaspheme him in the heart does this, right? As does despising nature and her gifts. This is where sodomites are. Contemptuously, let's see. Therefore, the smallest ring imprints its mark on Sodom and Cahors and him who speaks contemptuously of God with all his heart. Fraud, which bites every conscience. A man may play either on one who trusts him or one who does not. So in the second circle, hypocrisy, flatterers, sorcery, larceny, simoniacs, pimps, beraters, and such filth have their nest. But the other kind of fraud not only forsakes the love that nature makes, but the special trust that further added love creates. Therefore, at the universe's core, inside the least circle, the seat of every betrayer eternally is consumed. There we have a map for what the rest of hell is going to be. Let's see. Beaten by rain, those driven by wind, and those who collide and clash with angry tongues. How is it that all these are not confined in the red city to suffer if their wrongs have brought God's anger on them? And if not, then why are they in such a plight? What brings your thoughts to wander so from the proper route, says Virgil? Where has your mind been gazing? Don't you recall a passage in your ethics, the words that treat 3 dispositions counter to heaven's will? Incontinence, malice, and insane brutality. And how incontinence is less distasteful to God and earns less blame. Think carefully about this doctrine. Consider who they are whose punishment is above, outside. You'll see clearly why they are apart from the wicked here and why his vengeance smites them with less wrath. O sun that makes all troubled vision clear, you give solutions I'm so contented with that asking no less than knowing pleases me. But please, could we retrace our path back to the place where you said usury offends celestial goodness and solve that knot? He asked Virgil. Yes, cheers, Thomas. Appreciate you. Virgil says, okay, let's do it. As a pupil emulates his master, let's see. God has, as it were, a grandchild in your art. If you remember Genesis from the start, but since the usurer takes a different way, he condemns nature both in her own sort and in her follower as well, while he chooses to invest his hope another place. But now come follow me. It pleases me to go now. For above us in the skies, the fish, yeah, there we go. The fish are quivering at the horizon's edge. Then they come across the Minotaur, and they have to run to the descent. Page 95, Fantasia and Chernobog. They find a river of blood. And centaurs. Again, Fantasia imagery here. Right? Disney's so wonderful, you guys. Right? The centaur, Ezra Pound says that the centaur is the symbol of the poet because the centaur runs while he shoots the arrow. Essentially, that the poem, the lines of the poem run on while shooting their arrow of meaning. Yes. In Dante's Inferno, the centaurs are one of the sort of, I don't know, proto-demonic mythological figures that go and hunt the shades. Let's see. They find larceny. They're walking their path, their left-hand path. Remember, they're going literally left-handed. This whole time, they're literally left-hand path, transversing the fields of hell. They find here on page 99 in Canto 12, they come across Alexander. Here's Alexander, and he who held Sicily under for many a sad year, fierce Dionysus, that black hair there is Azalinos. Because of the warfare and bloodshed. He showed us one who kept off to one side within the bosom of God. He stabbed another's heart, and as it dripped blood ever since upon the Thames, that's a reference to Guy de Montfort. The blood decreased, sinking more and more until it cooked only the feet, and that is where we crossed. See, here you have seen the boiling stream contract. He said from here its bed grows deeper again till it completes its circle to reconnect with where God's justice makes the tyrants groan. Right? It goads Attila, a scourge on earth. Attila, the scourge of God, right? And Pyrrhus and Sextus. There also are eternally drawn the tears unlocked by boiling, milked from the eyes. Okay, let's see, page 101, Canto 13. We have the idea of dis as a negation. We have, let's see, okay, because in Canto 13, what Dante does noticeably is, remember, there's, variety. Poetry depends on variety. And one of the things that Dante does is he's continuously changing his diction and his syntax, especially depending upon his location in the Inferno. And here he specifically begins to speak in negatives, right? He says, Nessus has not yet reached the other side, where we move forward into woods unmarked by any path. The leaves not green, earth-hued, the boughs not smooth, knotted and crooked-forked, no fruit, but poison thorns of the wild beasts near Cecina and Cornetto that hate fields works. By men with plow and harrow, none infest thickets that are as rough or dense as this. Here the repellent harpies make their nests, who drove the Trojans from the Strophides with dire announcements of the coming woe. They have broad wings, a human neck and face, clawed feet, and swollen feathered bellies. They saw their lamentations in the eerie trees. Here the good master began, before you go farther, be aware that now you are in this, the second ring. Look well, for here one sees things which in words would be incredible. On every side, I heard wailing voices grieve, yet I could not see anyone there to wail. So here, people, shades, souls are transformed into thorn bushes and thickets. And whenever the thorn is plucked, they bleed and they scream. Let's see. It's like the souls of serpents. The harlot that never takes its whore's eyes from Caesar's retinue, the common fatal vice of courts, inflamed all minds against me. So inflamed Augustus that the honors I claimed in gladness were converted into pain. Dying would be a way to escape disdain, making me treat my juster self unjustly. And by this tree's strange roots, I swear again, I never betrayed my Lord who was so unworthy of honor. Yeah, this guy's adamant in his sin. Of course, like it said in the beginning, there's no reprieve, right? These are final sins. They actually did. But yet these shades, these souls in hell continue to flout their so-called innocence, even though they are clearly not. They've been judged. Let's see. Mino sends it down to the seventh circle. Black bitches filled the woods, avid and quick. They set their teeth on the one who stopped to crouch and tore his limbs apart. And then they took the wretched members away. So the hounds of hell, right? The hounds of hell are tearing these shades apart. Rachel at Base Homeschool Mom says, this is fascinating. I'm embarrassed how much great literature I haven't read. I'm a nonfiction history buff, but these streams will truly make me better at what I do. Oh, that's very sweet. I'm sure they're not making you better. Rachel, by the way, everybody's a great writer. You guys read her article on MK Ultra and Ewan Cameron on her Substack. Rachel is also a confirmed great writer in print by her Occult History of Feminism on Amazon. But also, yeah, there's no need to be for anyone out there to be embarrassed about the amount of great literature that you haven't read. I think that, that's one of the reasons I'm doing this I don't think I'm introducing anybody to literature they have. Everybody knows the works that we've covered, at least in terms of absorption into, your consciousness through your education and through life. I'm just trying to, I am trying to analyze them on a deeper or high IQ level, if you want, I don't know. Ultimately I'm trying to, my purpose is it's like when you're writing, you write for yourself at your best, right? Depending upon your content. You can also write in an instructional way for people who are new to something, but I'm just trying to speak to to one who's myself at my best, if that makes sense, you guys. And I don't expect anybody to, a lot of people, you guys out there, I'm sure you may have read Dante's Inferno. You may have read it in college or grad school and, or whatever. And if you haven't, that's cool too. But I just think it's interesting. And so hopefully it's, this is fun. And like you, Rachel, I'm also a nonfiction history reader. That is mostly what I read. But I think that we can gain a lot from understanding. I'm sure you guys would agree. We can gain a lot from understanding works, especially the great works in the canon of literature, and especially great monumental works that have given Western thought and systems, so much, like Dante. He gave Italian its language, right? Gave Italy its language. Let's see. But thank you so much. And let's see. Let's take a little. Somebody just dropped me a fat. Oh, that was Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate you. Yeah, Rachel drops me $5. Thanks for another entertaining and awesome stream. Cheers, my friend. Yes, cheers to you, my friend. I appreciate you so much. Thanks to everybody out there. Thanks to everybody who's supported me in the past, who's continuing to support me. Please, if you're watching this now, as I've said, a few times now, I know it's redundant. But please smash that like and leave me a comment in the comment section when you're done. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe bell and get the notifications. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers, so I appreciate everybody who's watching me. You guys are great. And then, of course, if you got a few extra coin lying around, think about sending me a fat chat out there. Really appreciate you. On to Canto 14, page 111. They come across all over the sand, distended flakes of fire drifted from aloft. This is a reference to Sodom and Gomorrah, burning of Sodom and Gomorrah. To extinguish them before the fire could spread, eternal fire descended in such profusion. Here we go again on page 113 with the damned continue to flout their sin in hell. O Capaneus, that this unquenched pride remains in you just punishes you the more. No torment but this raging of yours could goad with agony enough to match your ire. He was one of the 7 kings of besieged Thebes and seems still to bear disdain for God. Now, that is ultimately realized in the final canto of the poem, where Lucifer is trapped in the ice because he's, as we'll see, he still has his seraphim's wings, but Dante describes them as being bat-like. So they've lost their feathers, but they are continuously beating the air. And because he's frozen in ice, Lucifer's beating of the air with his bat wings only serves to whip up more cold in this frozen zone, right? So in other words, it is emblematic, or it is metaphorical for the fact that he continues to writhe in his own sin. Every action that he takes is a willful action, which continues to, swaddle him in frozen, abject sin. Let's see. Page 117, Canto 14, we have the left-hand path again. The place is, as you know well, the place is round, although you have come far toward the pit. By left turns always down. You haven't completed all the circle. Therefore, if anything new appears that we haven't seen, it should not bring amazement to your face. And then they come across Phlegethon, the river. The rivers in hell are Acheron, Styx, and Phlegethon. I think Phlegethon is the one that's blood. They don't see the river Lethe. The Lethe you shall see, but out of this abyss, there where repented guilt removes, souls gather to cleanse themselves. Every flame here is extinguished here. They don't go across the river Lethe because there's no forgetfulness. They are meant to remember their sin. Canto 15 is one of the most infamous cantos because he comes across this guy, Brunetto, who is a creeper, who's down there because he's described as a sodomite, but he's probably a creeper. And he's got a scorched face. But Dante knew him personally and then places him in hell, which leads one to believe that he may have creeped on Dante, or at least on others that he knew. But yeah, he's a filthy creep and he's in hell. Good. So let's see. If you keep navigating by your star, you find a glorious port. Here's the water imagery again. If I discerned well in the fair life, had my years been more, so I could witness how heaven has been kind to you, I would have wished your work good cheer. But that ungrateful, malignant folk who descend from those brought down from Faisal long ago, and he'll still smack of mountains and rocky grounds. They smack of honor both. Remember in Macbeth? So well thy words become thee as thy wounds, they smack of honor. Will make themselves for good things that you do. Your enemies, and there is reason in that. Among the bitter sorb trees, it seems undue when the sweet fig in season comes to fruit. They come across the Wheel of Fortune. He who has listened well will understand, which seems like almost like a pre-Masonic Gnostic watchword phrase. Then all clerics and men of letters, all renowned, all in the world, all stained by this one crime. I think he's talking about creepers there. Canto 16, we get the water imagery and people linked on the Wheel of Fortune. Okay, I'm going to skip forward to Canto 17, page 141, because we get the whirlpool imagery. And here we get the gyre and the falcon cannot hear the falconer of Yeats. And then they come across this beast, Geryon, who is a monster, and who they hop on his back, and Geryon sort of flies them. Described as swimming, though. He's flying, but he's swimming, and he sort of swims down this into one of the nether regions, and they come across Malebolge. So this is one of my favorite sections, Canto 18, page 143. There is a place called Malebolge in hell, constructed wholly of iron-colored stones, including the circumferential wall. Right in the center of this malign field yawns, right? Yawns. A wide, deep pit concerning its design, I shall say more in time. A belt remains between the base of that high wall of stone and the central pit, a circular band divided in 10 concentric valleys, as in a plan where guardian moats successively are graded around a castle's walls. In such a place, a series of small bridges would be provided out from the fortress threshold and across to the last bank. Just so, from the rock wall's foot ran spoke-wise ridges crossing over each fosse and its embankment, extending to the pit that gathers them and cuts them off. This place was where we found ourselves when we alit from Geryon's back. The poet leading us held to the left, and I came on behind. To my right side, I saw new tortures, new woes, and new tormentors with whom the first ditch teemed. Down at its bottom were naked sinners. So we get a bunch of things here. We get inspiration for the ninth gate, the black hole, Chernobog and Fantasia. We get the left-hand path. We also get continuous. See, you don't even realize because that's what great poetry does. It's like it's almost like writing subconsciously, right? Because the words, the phrases, the imagery, the sounds all connect and push you along on this narrative. Because we have the circumferential, the concentric, and the spoke-wise ridges, and then we have cacophonous language here, right? So when you map it out, it's like this grand design. That's what poetry is, right? First mention of demons. I saw demons, he says. Clear, to the point, right? Horned and carrying large scourges, and they struck savagely from behind. Ah, at the first blow, how terribly they forced them to be quick, lifting their heels. One of the demons comes across this guy and says, "Get moving, pimp. This is no place to look for women to sell." Rejoining my escort, I came with him to where a ridge of rock jutted from the bank. We climbed. So that's why the demons are coming from behind, and Dante is walking behind Virgil, because this is where sin sort of sneaks up on them from behind and where pimps will take advantage of people. He comes across Jason and the Argonauts. Page 149. This is the language here is pretty tough. It says, the banks were caked with mold that clings there, formed by an exhalation that steams from down below, offensive to behold and to inhale. The bottom is so far down that we could nowhere see it until we scaled the ridge's high point at the arch's crown. When we had reached it, I saw deep down in the fosse people immersed in filth that seemed to drain from human privies. Searching it with their eyes, I saw one there whose head was so befouled with shit, you couldn't tell which one he was, layman or cleric. Looking at me, he howled, "And why are you so greedy to look at me when all these are just as filthy?" Right, of course. Right? this damned soul. No, look at everybody else, not me. Yeah, right. I called because if memory serves me properly, I saw you once when your hair was dry before I knew you in Alessio Interminenti of Luca, which is why I eye you more than all the rest. And he then beating his head, down here is where my flatteries that store with which my tongue seemed never to be cloyed have sunk me. Then my leader gave me advice. Extend your gaze a little farther ahead so that your eyes may fully observe the face of that disheveled strumpet who in the mire scratches her body as she stands or squats with shit-rimmed fingers. She is Thais, the whore, who asked, and is my favor with you great? Replied enormous to her paramour, and let our sight be satisfied with that. Page 151, Canto 19. Oh, Simon Magus. Here we go, Simon Magus. Simon Magus. And what did I write here? What's my note? Simon Magus, and this is like where the Hermeticists are, but it's not where the alchemists are quite yet. And oh, you wretched crowd of those who follow him and prostitute in your rapacity the things of God, which should be brides of righteousness to get silver and gold. It is time the trumpet sounded for you. The third pouch is where you're put. Now we were at the next tomb, having ascended to where the ridge hangs over the fosse's middle. Oh, supreme art, your mighty art is supreme wisdom. Your mighty art is extended through heaven on earth and in the world of evil. And with what justice is your power assigned? Dante then goes on in this section to talk about how he makes reference to the fact that he once had to break a font to save a drowning baby in a church. And he says, let this put the lid on the matter. So he's repentant. And then he says, this will be up, because he sees the lids covering these privies and these holes, which, the inversion. And then let's see. People are getting their feet cooked. Oh, here we come across the Simoniacs, right? They're in here for simony. Pray tell me, how much treasure did our Lord ask of St. Peter? This is Dante talking to this damn soul. How much treasure did our Lord ask of St. Peter before he put the keys into his keeping? Surely he required nothing but follow me. Neither did those with Peter or Peter himself take silver or gold from Matthias, who was chosen for that place, lost by the guilty soul. Stay where you're held, for these are your deserved punishments. Guard well the ill-earned gains that made you hold in opposing Charles. So he says, for avarice like yours distributes grief, afflicting the world by trampling on the good and raising the wicked. Shepherds like yourself, the evangelist intended when he said that she who sits upon the water's edge was seen by him in fornication with kings. Oh, dog's barking. All right, I'm going to take a 2-second break here, you guys. I'm going to give my baby something to eat. And then we'll move on to Canto 20, and then we'll keep going. Not much more to go. All right, give me just a second, okay? Okay, hopefully that's satisfying. Yeah, she says hello. All right, so now we get Canto 20, the people with the backwards heads. Thank you, Rachel, for staying. The people with the backwards heads, and that is a scene. Have you guys ever seen the movie Constantine? Actually, the TV show, one of my friends played Keanu Reeves' character, Constantine, in the TV show Constantine, that was short-lived, unfortunately. But Constantine, remember when he actually goes into hell, and obviously that takes a lot of imagery from Dante's Inferno, but one of the most striking images is the people walking around with their heads on backwards. No, I don't. No, she eats better than I do. Yes, Ryan. Yep, Ellie. And he says, let's see. Yeah, we went to drama school together. He was a year above me at drama school. Welshman. Very cool, very funny. Let's see. We get in this circle, he comes across Tiresias and the Twans people. Let's see. He comes across Tiresias. Tiresias again is also taken by T.S. Eliot and put into The Wasteland. Tiresias, we've covered Tiresias before, the blind seer. Tiresias is a blind seer, but he's also he's hermaphroditic, and he's a Baphomet figure. He's blind. He's a blind seer because he can't see what's in front of him, but he sees the future. And he represents this, sort of Baphomet unification of opposites. But he is in hell, of course. And remember, he is in Oedipus Rex. He tells Oedipus Rex, Oedipus comes after him. Go see my Oedipus Rex stream if you haven't watched that. Let's see. Says, and here's Tiresias, the seer who unmanned through all his body until the day he struck a second time with his staff at serpents entwined and resumed his manly plumage. Plumage, because that's actually a term from in acting, right? You say the fig leaf. It's like, it's kind of it's a criticism of how actors, especially amateur actors, will stand on stage when people don't know what to do with their hands. A lot of times actors, will have a prop, right? So they can do something with their hands. But people are, amateur actors especially, are not content with standing with their hands to their side because they are not like confident in the person that they're playing. When people are just being themselves, people will often, they stand how they stand. But actors will be self-conscious of that. And so they will often put their hands in front of them and cover their front. And you call that a fig leaf because of the paintings of, for instance, Adam and Eve, right? In classical paintings covered with the fig leaf, right? They were naked and they were ashamed, right? And so the serpents entwined, obviously we get, a phallic imagery there, but we also get sort of a caduceus imagery. And at the end, let's see, of this section, here's where the divinators are. There's a guy named Michael Scott, who was a historical figure. Michael Scott was a divinator in one of the royal courts. He was a Scotsman. But at the end of this section, one of my favorite parts, because I was unaware of that. I'd forgotten about this. It's the Cain and the moon. So he says at the end of Canto 20, incantation and charm, but come already. Cain in the moon positions both hemispheres with his pale blue thorns. His term closes in the waves below Sevilla. The round moon that deep in the wood last night brought you no harm. Even while he spoke these words, we were moving on. The Cain in the moon is an Italian folk tradition that says that when Cain, was forced to wander the earth, he was then banished to the moon, and the craters on the moon are the crater. Let me find the reference here so I don't say it incorrectly. The Cain and the moon. Let's see. Italian, yeah. Let's see. The spots on the moon as the shape of Cain carrying thorns. He's banished to the moon by God after trying to excuse himself for murdering his brother Abel. Folk thing, but I think that's cool. Cain the moon. Interesting phrase. Certainly when you look at the moon, you guys, when you look at the man, I remember talking to somebody recently, and I said, yes, the man in the moon. And they said, what? I said, the man in the moon. And they were like, what are you talking about? Is that a conspiracy theory? And I was like, no, dude, the fucking man in the moon, the man in the moon. You look up at the moon, it's a thing, the man in the moon. They never heard of the man in the moon, right? They never heard of the Jim Carrey movie. They never heard of the damn Fake and Gray REM song, but they never heard of the Man in the Moon. So anyway, I had to explain to them what that was. And I said, yeah, if you look at the moon, you see a face in the moon. Everybody knows that, right? But when I look at the moon, you guys, I don't know what other people see, but when I look at the moon, I see the face of someone screaming, like in agony. That's what I see when I look at the moon. Now, that's not like a statement of like my psychology or something. I mean, that's what I see. And I guess the Italians think that too, because they see the shape of Cain carrying his thorns on the moon. Page 21. Excuse my language, folks. I didn't mean to cuss there. Right? It's a family show. It's not a family show. It's not a family audience. This is not a family show. We're just, we're analyzing literature, but excuse my language. Okay. Canto 21, he mentions the comedy by name. And so we went from bridge to bridge and spoke of things which my commedia does not mean to sing. The next fissure of Malebolge with astounding darkness, a heavy pitch. And then he says, watch out. What Virgil says, watch out, watch out. And there's a demon chasing him. And it's the Malebolge. The Malebolge are the fingers of, Satan. They're the demons who are tormenting people with, pitchforks and scourges, like people see in their traditional views of visions of hell. Virgil says, no matter what offenses they offer me, do not be frightened. I know how things are done. He sort of sweet talks them, and they into giving them pass because he has a pass, right? So they're going to keep transversing. But we have specific demons mentioned here, Malacoda, etc. A bunch of them have sort of Italian names, which speaks to the common Italian and the low nature of, literally low, right? Because they're in hell, of Dante's verbiage. And they wheel along the left-hand bank. Then we have reference to Dante's military service. I'm going to skip ahead. Dante was a military guy. I see Ewok faces. That's right, because we're looking at the third moon of Endor. Kristen says, I guess so, LOL. I shouldn't be reading the chat. I'm going to keep going. Let's see. We have, in this circle, in this canto, in canto 23, we have a friar who is crucified on the ground. They look down and there's a guy who's crucified on the ground, and that's because let's see, is he who counseled the Pharisees to bend the expedient way by letting one man be put to torture for the people. You see him stretched naked across the path to feel the weight of everyone who passes. Right? He sacrificed one for the good of the many, and that put him in hell. Sacrifice someone innocent. Page 23. In Bologna, the saying goes, as I've heard, that the devil is endowed with many vices, among them that he lies and is the father of lies, Dante says. I've also heard, and then my guide moved onward, setting the pace with many strides, and with his features stirred to some disturbance by his anger yet. Let's see. There are parts in this where Virgil gets mad at Dante. He's like, come on, man. And Dante's like, I felt shame. And then he looks at him like a father. Canto 35, he speaks directly to the reader again. Reader, if you are slow to credit what I tell you next, it should, by little wonder, for I who saw it know that I myself can hardly acknowledge it. While I was staring at the sinners below, a serpent darted forward that had 6 feet. And basically these serpents enwrap these people, these shades. If you believe, and there's a name on the moon, and bite their heads off and endlessly flail them. In the 8th circle, Canto 26, we come across Ulysses and Diomedes, and it says, let's see, They're there. Ulysses, Odysseus, right? My longing for experience of the world of human vices and virtue is what put him there. They pay the price for palladium. I would have found them difficult to restrain. Turning our stern toward the morning light, we made wings of oars in an insane flight, always gaining on the left. This is Ulysses talking. Ulysses makes is taking the left-hand path and is sort of flying through the air on his ship. The night showed all the stars now of the other pole. Our own star fallen so low, no sign of it, rose from the sea. The moon's low face glowed full 5 times since we set across the deep. Full fathom 5, right, from Shakespeare, from The Tempest. Until the sea closed over us, and now they are closed up in the abyss of hell. Let's see. We have references to the Crusades. Oh, here we go. Canto 27. They come across this guy who committed an atrocity because this is a historical person. He committed an atrocity because a cleric offered him absolution to do this deed. And he's put in hell, Dante says, because I have the power to lock and unlock heaven, as you know, for the keys are 2, whose worth seemed not dear to my predecessor. This guy says, let's see. Given, Father, that you are washing me of the taint of this sin into which I now must fall, large promises with fulfillments that are scant will bring you high throne triumph over all. Because the guy told him, look, you can conquer heaven and earth. And he says, no one has absolution without repenting, nor can one will a sin and repent at once, because the contradiction precludes it. In other words, no one has absolution. Yes. In other words, you can't be told, go commit this sin, right, willingly, and then, ask repentance and you'll be forgiven, but commit the sin. Because you already know what you're doing, right? And this particular sin was slaughtering a bunch of people. They come to the 9th chasm, the 9th circle. Abject pain. This is where the abject pain and body horror comes into play. I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of horror in this so far, but this is like hell. This is literally hell. It says, no barrel stave in and missing its end piece was ever gaped as wide as the man I saw split open from his chin down to his loins. And that's Macbeth. Shakespeare took that for Macbeth, right? We split him from the nave to the chops. And from the splayed trunk, the spilled entrails dangled between his thighs. I saw his organs, and the sack that makes the bread we swallow turn to shit, he says. Look how Mohammed claws and mangles himself, torn apart down to the breast. Look how I tear myself. And Ali goes weeping before me, like me, a schismatic, and cleft, split open from the chin among his face up to the forelock. All you see here when alive taught scandal and schism, so they are cleavered like this. A devil waits with a sword back there to carve each of us open afresh each time we've gone our circuit round this road. Our wounds close up before we pass them again. Let's see. A demon grabs somebody by the jaw. This is the creature he does not speak, who once in exile knew words to persuade Caesar at the Rubicon. This is Curio. Curio's down there because he told Caesar to go ahead and cross the Rubicon and unleash civil war. Bertrand de Bon carries his own head like a lantern. Canto 29. We're getting close to the end here. Canto 29. Virgil said to me, "What are you staring at? Why let your vision linger down there among the disconsolate and mutilated shades? You found no reason to delay like this at any other pit. Consider if counting them, what's your plan? The valley extends a circular route for 22 miles, and already the moon is under our feet. Let your intelligence distract itself with thoughts of him no more. Attend to other things. While he remains down here, he is below the bridge. For there I saw him with his finger point you out and fiercely threaten you." So Virgil sees this demon pointing at Dante. And of course, this is a demon that Dante knew when he was alive. And Dante was thinking, oh, let me go talk to this guy real quick and ask him why he's down here. One of the themes, of course, of the work is the fact that when they are called upon to speak, they must speak. They must tell what their sin is. That's part of the shades' entire purpose. They wallow in their own sin and recounting their own sin. But when they are commanded to speak, they must speak. And Dante wants to go speak to this demon, but of course, Virgil tells him, no, he was looking at you. He doesn't like you. They come across, their nails were snagging scabs from the skin as a knife blade might remove scales from a carp, or as if the knife were dragging still larger scales some other fish might have. These people are like clawing and tearing at their own bodies. They're constantly doing that in the Inferno. They're like, the violence on themselves is replete. They come across, let's see, alchemists in the ninth circle. So the alchemists and the transhumanists are in the ninth circle of hell, right? Because they are violating the laws of God and nature and trying to transcend and enter heaven without by they're trying to steal into heaven. They end up in hell. Let's see. Daedalus is down there because he's essentially an alchemist, and he constructed the labyrinth. Canto 30, they come across people condemned for infanticide, in incest, and other such horrible things. Let's see. Virgil advises against gossip and says, don't listen to it. Do not forget, I'm always at your side. Should fortune bring you again to where you hear people who are arguing as those two did, wanting to hear them as a low desire. He says low because they're in the nice circle. But these demons are arguing with each other, and they're like clawing at each other. These shades are clawing at each other. Then he comes across in Canto 31 the giants. He's on the rim of the frozen lake, and he comes across Nimrod, who this is the part with the gibberish. I'm sorry, the other part wasn't. This is the part. But he does mention Raphael, so the guy's been condemned by Raphael, the archangel. For every language is to him as is to all the others. No one fathoms it. Fathom, full fathom, 5 fathom, because no one can comprehend it, but also they can't understand it because they are in the fathoms, the deep of the abyss. Cocytus is the name of the frozen lake at the bottom of hell, and it's locked in cold. Do not compel us to seek some other one like Typhon or Titius. Typhon is the Typhonian order, is the fake and gray. One of the, I think it's one of the OTO orders, but it's certainly an occult order, and is one of the grades that Michael Aquino mentioned in the Temple Set. Typhon is a giant beast of the abyss. And then we have another Anglo-Saxon reference here. I would have wished for another road, he says. And then finally we have, but having stooped, he set us gently upon the bottom. Lucifer is swallowed in along with Judas, nor did he stay bent down, but like a ship's mast raised himself again. Again, we have the nautical theme, and we have there being a giant basically picks them up in his hands and places them down at the bottom of the abyss. Canto 32, if I had harsh and grating rhymes to befit that melancholy hole, which is the place all other rocks converge and thrust their weight, then I could more completely press the juice from my conception. Press the juice like a wine. It's like an inverted wine imagery, right? Water and wine. And because they are at the bottom of the, it says, but since I lack such lines, I feel afraid as I come to speak to this. It is not jokingly that one begins to describe the bottom of the universe, because they are at the bottom of the universe, the very bottom of the actual universe. And also we have onomatopoeia in the beginning of that about harsh and grating rhymes, because the sounds they hear are harsh and grating. Says we back again now though. Oh, did we cut out? Hopefully we didn't cut out, you guys. Are we good? We still good? Okay. A lake that ice made less like water than glass. And they see shades and I'm sorry, I shouldn't be reading the chat. You guys keep going. They see shades locked in ice. Two shades there packed head to head like a goat. Then they and like two goats, each butted the one he faced in helpless rage. He sees Cain is in the ninth circle, of course, and then he sees Mordred. So he knows the Arthurian legends, right? Mordred is who ran Arthur through Le Mort d'Arthur, right? Who ran Arthur through with the lance, which is supposed to be symbolize it's the lance of Longinus, and also this is like the Fisher King. But Mordred commits the mortal sin. He's his relative. He kills his kin. He also kills his king, and he runs him through like with a lance of Longinus. He's down there. Let's see. Oh, Dante comes across this shade, and then he gets bold. He says, what I desire is quite the opposite. Get you gone and come to trouble me no more. Inept as you are, not knowing how to flatter at this great depth, that I've reached out and seized him by the hair and shook his scruff. Now name yourself forthwith. He tells this demon to name himself because he won't name himself. But he does. Are you so weary of the tune your jaws create that now you are barking too? What devil is at you? Accursed traitor, for now to your disgrace I will report about what you is true. This guy says, basically, this guy's a snitch also, but he's a traitor. And he's talking, so he sees some of the worst people he sees are people that were, close to Dante in terms of the era. One of whom is an archbishop who shut up a man with his family in a tower, and the man is in there too, eating his own head because the man ate his kids. It's a real thing. The man was locked up in the tower by the archbishop. Archbishop's in there. Archbishop's in there because he killed his whole family. But then the man is in there because he violated, he violated the sanctity of his children's trust in him, and he ate them because they were starving, and the kids sacrificed themselves for him, but he cannibalized them. So he's the ninth circle of hell. He betrayed them. Knowing that as soon as a soul, page 291, Canto 33, commits betrayal the way I did, a devil displaces it and governs inside the body until its toll of years elapses. Here's where I said people are walking around on earth still, but their soul is already in hell. They're so bad. These are people that Dante knew personally, who in body still appears alive above. And then here we go, Canto 34, the final canto. Vexilla Regis Proteans Inferni, advance the banners of hell, which is an inversion of, I think it's in Psalms, right? The banners of God, the King advance. He says, let's see, Canto 34. He made me stop and moved in front of me. Look, here is Dis, he said, and here is the place where you must arm yourself with the quality of fortitude. How chilled and faint I was on hearing that. You must not ask me, readers. I do not write it. Words would not suffice. I neither died nor kept alive. Consider with your own wits what I, alike denuded of death and life, became as I heard my leader. The emperor of the realm of grief protruded from mid-breast up above the surrounding ice. This is Lucifer. A giant's height and mine would have provided closer comparison than would the size of his arm and giant. Envision the whole that is proportionate to parts like these. If he was truly once as beautiful as he is ugly now and raised his brows against his maker, then all sorrow may well come out of him. All the concentric circles are leading down to this, right? And also he's at the bottom of the universe, and the weight, you can feel the weight of the heaviness of the air and the earth, because it's all on top. Right? It's all on top of Lucifer down here at the bottom. He chooses to be there. How great a marvel it was for me to see three faces on his head. In front, there was a red one joined to this. Each over the midpoint of a shoulder, he had two others, all three adjoining at the crown, because he's the inversion of the Trinity. That on the right appeared to be a shade of whitish yellow. The third had such a mien as those who come from where the Nile descends. But he's a beast. Two wings spread forth from under each face's chin, strong and befitting such a bird immense. I have never seen at sea so broad a sail, unfeathered, bat-like, and issuing three winds that went forth as he beat them to freeze the whole realm of Cocytus that surrounded him. He wept with all six eyes, and the tears fell over his three chins, mingled with bloody foam. The teeth of each mouth held a sinner, kept as by a flax rake. Thus he held three of them in agony. For the one, the front mouth gripped, the teeth were as nothing to the claws, which sliced and tore the skin until his back was stripped. That soul, my master said, who suffers most is Judas Iscariot, head locked inside. He flails his legs. Of the other two, who twist with their heads down, the black mouth holds the shade of Brutus, writhing, but not a word will he scream. Cassius is the sinewy one on the other side. And Cassius was sinewy. Remember in Julius Caesar and our analysis of Julius Caesar, Cassius was lean and wolf-like, right? Caesar even remarks upon how he doesn't trust people who are lean and wolf-like. From tuft to tuft descended through the mass of matted hair and crusts of ice. They climbed down. Cling tight, for it is stairs like these, like one who is exhausted, which we must scale to part from such evil. Expecting I would see Lucifer as I left him and saw his shape inverted. He specifically tells us inverted, right? With his legs held upward. So what happens here is they climb up. They climb up the body of Lucifer, and then suddenly it's like an as above, so below. They cross like the midpoint or the meridian. And then now they're climbing down the legs. And then from there, they end up, and he looks back and he expects to see Lucifer, sees the legs, and he says, where is the ice and how can he be fixed head down like that? And he says, Virgil says, you imagine you were still on the other side across the center of the earth where I grappled the hair on the evil serpent's hide who pierced the world. And all through my descent, you were on that side. When I turned my head and legs about, you passed the central point to which is drawn from every side all weight. Now you are on the opposite continent beneath the opposite hemisphere to that which canopies the great dry land therein. So in other words, he says like Lucifer is like cast down into hell, is like on the opposite pole from Jerusalem. Under the zenith of that one is the site whereon the man was slain, who with the man, capital M, man, was slain, who without sin was born and lived. Your feet this minute press upon a little sphere whose rounded skin forms the Judica's other outward face. Here it is morning when it is evening there. The one whose hair was like a ladder for us is still positioned as he was before. On this side, he fell down from heaven. The earth, which till then stooped out here, impelled by fear, veiled itself in the sea and issued forth. There is below, as far from Beelzebub as one can see, within his tomb, a place one cannot know by sight, but by the sound a little runnel makes as it wends the hollow rock, its flow as worn. descending through its winding channel. So remember, he named in this part again, he named Satan three names essentially, right? He said Dis, Lucifer, and Beelzebub. To get back up to the shining world from there, my God and I went into that hidden tunnel. They escaped through the reverse hellmouth. And following its path, we took no care to rest, but climbed, he first, then I. So far, through a rounded aperture, I saw appear some of the beautiful things that heaven bears, where we came forth and once more saw the stars. So it ends with stars, just like all three sections of the Divine Comedy end, or the Commedia, the comedy end. Yeah. And also, this canto ends with two lines rather than one. See, it's in terza rima and three-lined stanzas set each canto, but each canto ends with a single line. This one ends because Dante's essentially by himself, but this one, it ends with two lines because he actually comes out with Virgil. He entered by himself. He came out with Virgil. Virgil's going to leave him for the next section because he's, he has to stay. But he comes out, and remember, he said that he handed it over his will to Virgil. So they were one, and now he comes out, and they are two again, two people. And that is it. So he escaped from hell. He's made his way through all the way down to the nine circles, and that is Robert Pinsky's Dante's Inferno. Okay. Again, I would, there are a lot of translations. A more classical, poetical translation of this would be Percy Shelley's translation of the Inferno. We've discussed Shelley before. We did Ozymandias. That was one of our early streams. Go back and watch my Ozymandias analysis. But I would recommend Robert Pinsky, who again was the poet laureate of the United States. And I've got one of his other books in there, The Figured Wheel. And his poem is dedicated to the poet Frank Bidart, who I have his book, Squeaky Chair. I have his book somewhere up here. Oh, no. Where is it? Frank Bidart. Frank Bidart is one of the, I think he's dead now. R.I.P. Okay, I don't know where I put it, but I've got Frank Bidart's book up there. He was one of the well-known poets of mostly of the 20th century. Shouts out to my cousin out there, if he happens to watch this, who introduced me to Frank Bidart. And again, I would recommend this Pinsky version because it's one of the only versions that kind of gets at the spirit of Dante's language, which is, again, that Dante writes in the common Tuscan vernacular, which gave birth to modern Italian. And again, just to reiterate, the whole point of that was to see. Peace, Goose. Thanks for being here, homie. Appreciate you. His whole point was because he's going low, and he's literally going low, and he's figuratively going low into the abyss, into the abyssal zone within this poem. Yes, and the Vita Nuova. We didn't really get to talk much about Beatrice in this because, but she's like sort of this Gnostic Sophia archetype for Dante. But she appears later in the Divine Comedy, and she doesn't really play so much of a part in the Inferno. But I think that the Inferno is the most, is such a visceral, epic poem. And I think that, it was I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed reading that. Of course, after doing Blood Meridian, right, our senses were kind of desensitized to the violence of the language after Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. Go back and watch Blood Meridian stream. But that's about all I got, you guys. Hold on. We got something else here. Somebody else dropping some fat donations. from Robert Terry. Appreciate you. $10 via PayPal. Appreciate you, homeboy. Thank you so much for supporting me. Thank you to everybody who supported me so much. You guys, I mean, I would say you don't know how much I appreciate it, but you can, we can all appreciate that, I'm sure. Man, everybody knows, especially nowadays, it's easy to spend money, but it is so hard to make it. So I really appreciate you donating your hard-earned, your hard-earned Biden bucks, your coin to me, especially in these trying times when people forget, like, yeah, the gas prices went up, but man, so did the home gas price, right? I mean, if you got a gas grill or you got a gas stove or whatever, man, everything shot up. Everything is up, and it is tough out there. So I really appreciate you, and I'm going to be getting some, hopefully buying some more books, so we can do those. Let me know again in the comments afterwards what you guys want me to cover. I mean, people have been doing that, and I really appreciate it. And we got of course, there's a sort of long and infinite list of what to cover, but I will be certainly doing, Pound. Yeah, we did Ezra Pound. We did Fall Down Vanity User. We did Ezra Pound. We did an Ezra Pound stream. We talked about Ezra Pound a little bit, and we talked about the beginning. So that was cool. I kind of had to start with Ezra Pound as sort of kingmaker, monumental figure of the 20th century, and I know I've been kind of harping on about it now, but I definitely want to do Don DeLeo's White Noise. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. The story of Jack Gladney and postmodernism. We've done a couple of streams, discussing postmodernism. We did one on modernity. We need to find some literature for the current age, right? We need, we did modernism, we did postmodernism, we did some postmodernism. We kind of now live, in my own opinion, in this sort of we live in a postmodern era, right? We kind of had, modernism is like 1901 to the present, but really modernity is like 1901 to 1945 with the dropping of the atomic bomb. Then we have the postmodern era, 1945 to 2001. Then we have like the age of terror, and now we live in the Great Reset. So we need to find if there's any literature for the contemporary, era. Another one I like to do is a book I haven't read is Snowfall. I would like to do that, which is sort of a dystopian techno literature, which is pretty much what postmodernism is that, right? And Andrew says he wants me to do the Langoliers, and yeah, I need to do some. I need to look at Lonesome Dove. And what else? What else can I do, you guys? I don't know if people will, but I certainly will read your poetry if you publish it. I'm happy to read anybody's. And of course, just to reiterate, if anybody wants help with if anybody's a writer, or even, they're in college or grad school and they want help with literary analysis or essay or creative writing of any sort, drop me some Dugan coin, drop me some bucks, and I will look at whatever you want me to try and help you. Got to make a living, right? I certainly appreciate writing, and maybe I can offer my literary opinions on that. I don't want to say critical opinions, but I can certainly help you with another eye on your work. What else? I heard I need to do probably an Insta live on. There's a new Liam. We did an Instagram live on that Liam Neeson movie that came out not too long ago, which was pretty fun. Go to my Instagram at Bays Lit Analyzer and follow me on Instagram, you guys. If you haven't, you're watching this. I did an Instagram live on analyzing that that Liam Neeson film, which was sort of a, it's about an intelligence operation and FALSE, FLAGS, etc., and glowies. But he recently did another one, which is about, I don't want to say what it's about, but it's the most recent one. So maybe we can do that. And yeah, what else? I think that's about it. So you guys, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you all. I hope everybody has a good, what day is this? A good Wednesday night. Oh, it's the first of the month. Cashing checks in the month. Maybe one day soon I will do some of my little raps. They're not improvised. They're not like JD and Lil Aids over at Tristana. They're not as good as that. I can't really improvise, but I wrote them out, and so maybe I'll do that, and then somebody will put them to music. Rachel says Crucible just started. If we want to watch that next, definitely we'll check that out. Shouts out to Andrew and Rachel Wilson, based homeschool mom. And that's right, Little Raspy got some verses. I got some little fun little things that I wrote. So maybe we'll do that sometime soon. And also maybe I can share some of my own writing soon. I was thinking about sharing first couple of chapters of my book that I'm trying to write, Monarch. So maybe that would be interesting. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just babbling on. So thank you guys. Appreciate you. And thanks to everybody who supported me. Make sure that you smash the like, leave a comment, donate if you can. And if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell for notifications. That's about it. Thank y'all. I appreciate you and I love you. Peace.